I sat in that jail cell staring at the cold metal bars, unable to comprehend how my own family orchestrated my arrest. 3 hours ago, police found cocaine hidden in my bedroom dresser. My sister Madison stood behind our parents, all three telling officers they'd witnessed my drug problem for months. "Just take the blame," my mother whispered as handcuffs clicked around my wrists. "It'll be easier for everyone." But I know I've never touched drugs in my life. 6 months before that nightmare, my life seemed perfectly on track. I worked as a junior architect at Preston and Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious firms. The morning I received the email about leading the Greenwood Sustainable Housing Project, I actually squealed in my office. 28 years old and already managing a 7-figure development focused on environmental innovation. My colleagues celebrated with me over lunch, everyone acknowledging how hard I'd worked for this opportunity. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in Wilmette, eager to share the news. The familiar 2-story colonial looked exactly as it had throughout my childhood: white shutters, pristine against navy siding. My key still worked in the lock, a privilege my mother insisted on maintaining even though I'd moved out 6 years ago. I found them in the living room. My parents settled into their usual spots. Dad occupied his leather recliner reading glasses, perched on his nose as he scrolled through his tablet. Mom sat on the cream sofa, her attention fixed on the television, where some reality show played at low volume. Between them, sprawled across the love seat with her feet up on the ottoman, lay my younger sister, Madison. At 25, Madison still lived in our childhood home. Her latest educational venture, a photography program at the community college, had ended 3 weeks prior, when she decided the instructors didn't appreciate her artistic vision. This marked her 4th incomplete program in as many years. Before photography, she'd attempted nursing school, then culinary arts, followed by a brief stint studying fashion merchandising. "Mom tells me you got some project," Madison said without looking up from her phone. Her tone carried that particular blend of disinterest and disdain I'd grown accustomed to over the years. I settled into the armchair near the window, trying to maintain my enthusiasm. "It's actually a huge opportunity. The Greenwood development will provide affordable, eco-friendly housing for over 200 families. The design incorporates solar panels, rainwater collection systems, and community gardens." My father glanced up briefly. "That's nice, dear." He returned to his tablet without asking a single question about the project I'd dreamed of since graduate school. Madison snorted. "God, Bria, do you ever talk about anything besides work? Some of us have actual lives." The irony of that statement coming from someone who spent most days in pajamas binge-watching Netflix wasn't lost on me. But I'd learned years ago that pointing out Madison's hypocrisy only led to larger arguments where I somehow emerged as the villain. Mom immediately shifted into her familiar role as Madison's defender. "Your sister's just taking time to find her path, Bria. Not everyone needs to rush into corporate slavery." Corporate slavery. That's what they called my career, the one that allowed me to pay off my student loans, maintain my own apartment, and still help with family expenses when needed. Meanwhile, Madison's journey of self-discovery had cost our parents thousands in tuition for programs she never completed, not to mention her credit card bills. They quietly paid each month. I changed the subject, asking about Dad's retirement plans from his accounting firm. The conversation meandered through safe topics like weather and neighbor gossip until Madison suddenly sat up, fixing me with an intense stare. "By the way, I need to borrow some money. Just a couple $1,000 to cover some expenses while I figure out my next move." Before I could respond, Mom chimed in. "Oh, honey, didn't you have access to your grandmother's education fund? There should be plenty left for your needs." My stomach dropped. Grandma Eleanor had left each grandchild $50,000 specifically for education and career development. I'd used mine for graduate school and professional certifications. Madison's fund should have been mostly intact, given her pattern of dropping out before semester's end. Madison's face flushed. "That money's tied up in investments right now, can't access it without penalties." Something in her expression, a flicker of panic quickly suppressed, triggered my suspicion. Madison had never shown interest in investments before. Her financial strategy typically involved spending first and dealing with consequences later. That evening passed with typical family dynamics. My accomplishments dismissed or minimized, while Madison's potential was endlessly discussed and celebrated. I left feeling deflated, my excitement about the Greenwood project diminished by their indifference. The next morning, I contacted the financial advisor who managed our grandmother's estate. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Madison's education fund had been systematically drained over the past 18 months. $50,000 meant for her future gone. The withdrawals showed a pattern of escalating amounts, the largest ones coinciding with periods when Madison claimed to be enrolled in school. The real shock came from the transaction details: designer clothing purchases, luxury vacation packages, high-end electronics, even cosmetic procedures. My sister had burned through a small fortune while living rent-free and claiming poverty. Worse, she'd been telling our parents that I had somehow accessed her fund, setting the stage for a deception I didn't yet understand. I printed the statements, my hands shaking as I reviewed each fraudulent explanation Madison must have given our parents. The evidence painted a clear picture of deception and manipulation. Armed with proof, I believed my parents would finally see Madison's true nature. I scheduled a family meeting for that weekend, preparing to expose the truth. That decision would prove to be my first major mistake. I failed to recognize how deep their favoritism ran, or how far they would go to protect their image of Madison as the perpetual victim in need of rescue. The golden child narrative had been established long before this theft, and no amount of evidence would shake their faith in their biological daughter. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. The way Mom's face lit up when Madison entered a room while merely nodding at my presence. How Dad always found excuses for Madison's failures, but questioned every one of my successes. Oh, the family photos where Madison occupied center stage while I hovered at the edges, included but never truly belonging. But sitting in my downtown apartment that night reviewing those financial statements, I still believed truth and justice would prevail. I thought exposing Madison's theft would finally balance the scales of favoritism that had tilted against me for 28 years. Instead, I was about to learn that in my family, truth was negotiable, and justice came second to protecting Madison's fragile ego. The Greenwood project plan spread across my dining table as I worked late into the evening, trying to focus on sustainable architecture instead of sustainable family relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my boyfriend of 3 years, asking about dinner plans. I smiled, grateful for at least one stable, honest relationship in my life. If only I had known that Madison's theft was merely the opening act in a performance that would eventually land me in handcuffs, accused of crimes I didn't commit, while my family stood united against me. The $50,000 was just the beginning. My sister had much bigger plans, and my parents would prove all too willing to play their parts in her twisted production. 2 weeks after discovering Madison's theft, I still hadn't confronted my family. Marcus convinced me to wait to gather more information before the confrontation. His logical approach balanced my emotional response, one of many reasons I loved him. That Saturday morning, he surprised me with breakfast in bed and a question that would change everything. The ring sparkled on my finger as I stared in disbelief. Marcus knelt beside our bed, his brown eyes warm with emotion as he spoke about our future together. 3 years of dating had led to this moment, and my yes came without hesitation. Dr. Marcus Chen represented everything good in my life: stability, honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love. We spent the morning calling his family in California, sharing our joy through video calls filled with tears and congratulations. His mother immediately started planning, suggesting dates and venues, while his father offered wisdom about marriage and partnership. Their enthusiasm made the absence of my own family's reaction even more stark. I suggested we tell my parents in person that evening. Marcus squeezed my hand, understanding the complicated dynamics, but supporting my desire to include them in our happiness. We drove to Wilmette as the sun set the diamond catching light with every movement of my hand on the steering wheel. The house felt colder than usual when we entered. Madison lounged in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, despite it being barely 5 in the evening. Her eyes immediately zeroed in on my left hand, and her expression darkened before I could even speak. "Let me guess," Madison said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Perfect Bria has perfect news to share with her perfect boyfriend." She drained her wine glass in one long swallow. "Marcus and I are engaged," I announced, trying to inject joy into my voice despite Madison's hostility. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Mom looked between Madison and me, her face showing concern, but not the happiness I'd hoped for. Dad didn't even glance up from his newspaper, though I noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the pages. Madison exploded from the couch, her empty wine glass shattering against the hardwood floor. "Of course you are. You always have to one-up me, don't you? Can't stand to see me happy for 5 minutes without swooping in with your achievements and your perfect life." The accusation made no sense. Madison hadn't announced anything worth celebrating in months. Her version of happiness seemed to consist of day drinking and online shopping with money that wasn't hers. But logic never factored into Madison's emotional manipulations. Mom rushed to Madison's side, carefully stepping over the broken glass to wrap her arms around my sister. There, sweetie. I'm sure Bria didn't mean to upset you with her timing." My timing, I hadn't planned the proposal around Madison's non-existent accomplishments. Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me, clearly stunned by the family dynamics unfolding before him. He'd heard my stories, but witnessing the favoritism firsthand was different. Dad finally looked up, his expression stern as he addressed me. "You could have been more considerate, Bria. You know your sister's going through a difficult time." "What difficult time? She's been going through a difficult time for 7 years, according to you. When do I get to have a moment of joy without apologizing for it?" Madison's tears started then, perfectly timed as always. Through her sobs, she accused me of rubbing my success in her face, of deliberately choosing moments when she felt vulnerable to announce my achievements. Mom cooed and comforted while shooting disapproving glances my way. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, we came here to share happy news with family. Bria has nothing to apologize for. If you can't celebrate your daughter's engagement, perhaps we should leave." Dad's face reddened. "Don't tell me how to handle my family, young man. You might be a doctor, but that doesn't give you the right to interfere in our business." "Actually, I interrupted my engagement does make it his business, and if you can't show him basic respect, then we're done here." I grabbed Marcus's hand and headed toward the door, my engagement joy thoroughly trampled by my family's dysfunction. Behind us, Madison's voice rose to a wail about how I was abandoning the family and choosing a man over blood. The manipulation was textbook. Madison create drama play. Victim watch the world reorganize around her needs. We made it to the car before Madison appeared on the front porch, Mom supporting her as if she might collapse from the trauma of her sister's engagement. "Wait," Madison called out, her voice suddenly steady. "I need to talk to Bria. Alone." Against my better judgment, I approached the porch. Madison leaned close, her breath sour with wine, her whisper venomous. "You think you're so special with your fancy job and your doctor fiancé, but I'll make sure that wedding never happens. You've stolen enough from me." "Stolen? I've never taken anything from you, Madison. Unlike you, who literally stole $50,000 from Grandma's fund." Her smile was cold, calculating. "Nobody will believe that. Mom and Dad certainly don't. And by the time I'm done, nobody will believe anything you say." She turned and stumbled back inside, leaving me standing on the porch with a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Marcus waited patiently in the car, and as I slid into the passenger seat, he took my hand. "They don't deserve you," he said simply. "My family can't wait to welcome you properly. You'll see what real family support looks like." That night, as we celebrated quietly in our apartment with Chinese takeout and champagne, I tried to push Madison's threat from my mind. She'd always been dramatic, prone to grand statements and emotional manipulation. Surely this was just another tantrum that would blow over when she found a new focus for her perpetual dissatisfaction. Marcus pulled me close on the couch, playing with my engagement ring. "Tell me about your grandmother, the one who left the education funds." I smiled sadly. Grandma Rose was Dad's mother. She saw how they treated me differently from Madison, though she never said it outright. The education funds were her way of ensuring we both had equal opportunities. She'd be heartbroken to know Madison squandered hers. "Do you think that's why they favor Madison? Because you're adopted?" The question hung in the air. I'd wondered the same thing countless times but never had confirmation. My parents had told me about the adoption when I was 10, framing it as proof of how much they wanted me. But actions spoke louder than words, and their actions consistently showed Madison mattered more. "I don't know," I admitted. "They've never said anything directly, but sometimes I catch Mom looking at me like she's searching for someone else in my face. And Dad always introduces Madison as his daughter, but me as just Bria." Marcus kissed my forehead. "Their loss. You're extraordinary, and if they can't see that, we'll build our own family. One that celebrates achievements instead of resenting them." We spent the rest of the evening planning our future, discussing wedding ideas and potential honeymoon destinations. The joy Madison had tried to steal slowly returned as Marcus reminded me that I was choosing to create a new family unit with him, one based on mutual respect and genuine love. Still, as I lay in bed that night, Madison's threat echoed in my mind. "I'll make sure that wedding never happens." The venom in her voice had been real, not just wine-fueled dramatics. My sister had shown she was capable of significant deception with the stolen funds. What else might she do if she felt cornered or threatened by my happiness? The answer would come sooner than expected, and in ways I never could have imagined. Madison's campaign against me was already in motion, pieces moving on a board I didn't even know existed. While I planned wedding venues and guest lists, she planned something far more sinister. The stolen money had been a test run. Now she was ready for the main event. 3 days later, I received the first sign that Madison's threat wasn't empty. A call from my wedding venue of choice informed me that someone had called claiming to be me and canceled our tentative booking. When I protested that I hadn't called, the coordinator mentioned the caller had known all our personal details, including the deposit amount and preferred dates. It was a small thing easily fixed with a phone call and explanation, but it marked the beginning of Madison's campaign, a series of increasingly serious attacks designed to dismantle my life piece by piece. The girl who couldn't finish a single college program proved surprisingly capable when motivated by jealousy and spite. Marcus suggested we move up the wedding, sensing the escalation even then. I refused, not wanting to let Madison dictate our timeline. That stubborn pride would cost me more than I could imagine. Every day I delayed gave Madison more time to refine her plan, to lay groundwork for the betrayal that would eventually see me in handcuffs while my family watched in manufactured disappointment. The engagement ring on my finger promised a future filled with love and partnership. What I didn't know was that it also painted a target on my back, marking me as a threat to Madison's carefully cultivated victim status. In her mind, my happiness diminished hers, my success highlighted her failures, and my engagement represented the final insult in a lifetime of perceived slights. The first cyber attack hit my work computer on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after announcing my engagement. I'd arrived early to finalize presentations for the Greenwood project, coffee steaming beside my keyboard as I logged into the system. Instead of my usual desktop explicit images, filled the screen accompanied by malware alerts from our IT security. My face burned with embarrassment as I immediately called tech support, praying no one else had witnessed the display. Within minutes, IT supervisor James Morrison arrived at my desk, his expression grave as he examined my system. "This is sophisticated stuff," he muttered, fingers flying across his diagnostic tablet. "Someone with serious skills planted this. The virus is designed to look like you've been browsing inappropriate sites during work hours. If I hadn't caught the injection signature, even I might have believed it." My stomach churned. "Who would do this? Can you trace the source?" James shook his head. "They routed it through multiple proxy servers. But Bria, this wasn't random. Someone targeted you specifically. The malware had your employee ID embedded in the code." The implications sent chills down my spine. This attack could have ended my career if James hadn't been skilled enough to recognize the planted evidence. As he cleaned my system and documented the incident for HR, I couldn't shake the feeling that Madison's threat was materializing in unexpected ways. 2 days later, I discovered my car tires slashed in the parking garage beneath my apartment building. The security guard, Tony, found me standing beside my Honda Accord staring at the damage in disbelief. "Fourth floor right," Tony asked, already pulling up footage on his tablet. "Let me check the cameras from last night." We huddled in his booth watching grainy footage from 11:30 the previous evening. A figure in dark clothing and a baseball cap approached my car, keeping their face carefully angled away from cameras. They worked quickly, efficiently destroying all 4 tires before disappearing into the stairwell. "They knew where the cameras were," Tony observed. "See how they never once looked up? That takes planning, knowing our setup. Want me to call the police?" I filed a report, though the officers seemed skeptical about finding the perpetrator. Without clear facial footage or witnesses, they categorized it as random vandalism despite my insistence that I was being targeted. The detective suggested I might have upset someone at work or in the building, never considering the threat might come from family. Marcus installed a dashcam and additional security on my car that weekend, his protective instincts in overdrive. As he worked, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. His face darkened as he read, then quickly deleted whatever had appeared on his screen. "What was that?" I asked, noting his troubled expression. He hesitated before showing me his deleted folder. Anonymous messages had been arriving for days, all claiming I was cheating with various men. The latest included a photoshopped image supposedly showing me with a coworker at a hotel. Though clearly fake to anyone who looked closely, the steady stream of accusations was taking a toll. "Why didn't you tell me?" I felt hurt that he'd been dealing with this alone. "Because they're obviously lies and I didn't want to upset you more than you already are. But Bria, this is escalating. First your work computer, then your car. Now someone's trying to destroy our relationship. We need to consider who would go to these lengths." Madison's name hung unspoken between us, but I still resisted believing my sister capable of such calculated cruelty. Sibling rivalry was one thing, systematic destruction of my life was another. Yet who else would benefit from my downfall? That Sunday, desperate for normalcy, we attended a family barbecue at Marcus's cousin's house. The cheerful atmosphere and genuine warmth of his extended family provided temporary respite from the chaos, until my phone rang with Madison's number on the display. "Bria." "Oh my God, are you okay?" Her voice dripped with fake concern. "I just heard about your car. How terrifying. Do you want me to come stay with you? You must be so scared." The timing was too convenient. I hadn't told my family about the vandalism, yet Madison somehow knew. Her performance continued as she expressed shock and sympathy, offering support, while barely containing what sounded like satisfaction beneath her words. "How did you know about my car, Madison?" A pause. "Mom told me. She heard from Mrs. Chen next door that police were at your building. News travels fast, you know. So do you want me to come over or not?" I declined her offer and ended the call, but her knowledge of the incident confirmed my growing suspicions. Madison had always been careless about covering her tracks when gloating. This time, her eagerness to insert herself into my drama had revealed her hand. The next morning brought a new crisis. Preston, an associate's head of HR, called me into his office, where I found senior partner David Preston himself, waiting with a grim expression. "Bria, we've received serious allegations about your professional conduct." David began sliding a folder across the table. These arrived anonymously, but they include detailed claims about you sharing confidential client information with competitors. My hands shook as I reviewed the fabricated evidence emails, supposedly from my account discussing proprietary designs, timestamps showing after-hours access to restricted files, even a whistleblower statement claiming to have witnessed me photographing sensitive documents. "This is all fake," I said, my voice steadier than my nerves. "Check the email headers, verify the access logs against building security footage. I've never breached client confidentiality in my life." "We intend to investigate thoroughly," HR Director Patricia Williams assured me. Your record here has been exemplary, which is why we're not taking immediate action. But until we clear this up, you'll need to work under supervision, and your Greenwood Project Authority is temporarily suspended." The humiliation burned as I returned to my desk, knowing colleagues were already whispering about my summons to David's office. My assistant Janet shot me sympathetic looks while pretending to focus on her screen. The Greenwood Project, my career-defining opportunity, sat just out of reach, while anonymous lies threatened everything I'd built. That evening, I installed hidden cameras throughout my apartment, following the same logic that had protected my car. If Madison was entering my space, I needed proof. Marcus helped position the cameras, his jaw tight with anger at each new violation of our privacy and peace. "You need to confront your family," he said as we tested the final camera. "Show them what Madison's doing before this gets worse." I agreed, though my heart sank at the prospect. Armed with documentation of each incident, I scheduled another family dinner, hoping evidence would speak louder than Madison's manipulations. The cameras proved their worth within 48 hours. Tuesday afternoon, while I was at work, motion sensors triggered an alert on my phone. I watched in real time as someone entered my apartment using a key. The figure wore different clothes than the parking garage intruder, but their movements showed the same careful awareness of being potentially watched. They headed straight for my home office, rummaging through files and photographing documents with their phone. My hands trembled as I screenshot everything, finally having concrete evidence of the violation. The intruder spent 20 minutes in my apartment, plenty of time to plant evidence or steal information for their next attack. Racing home, I found everything seemingly normal except for subtle signs. Someone had been there, a drawer slightly ajar. Papers minutely shifted, my computer awakened from sleep mode, despite being shut down that morning. Nothing stolen but privacy, thoroughly violated. I compiled the footage onto a flash drive, adding it to my growing evidence file. The confrontation with my family couldn't wait any longer. Madison had crossed every line, and her parents needed to see their golden child's true nature before her campaign destroyed everything I'd worked to achieve. Marcus insisted on accompanying me to the family dinner, refusing to let me face them alone. As we drove toward Wilmette evidence folder on my lap and determination in my heart, I believed truth would finally prevail. My family would have to acknowledge Madison's crimes when confronted with video proof. How naive that hope would prove. The cameras had captured the intrusion, but not what I desperately needed: a clear shot of the intruder's face. Madison had been too careful, too aware of angles and shadows. What seemed like irrefutable evidence to me would become just another accusation for my parents to dismiss another example of me trying to tear down their precious daughter. The dinner that night would mark a turning point, though not in the way I expected. Instead of vindication, I would face the full weight of my family's dysfunction and their willingness to sacrifice truth for the comfortable lie of Madison's innocence. The evidence in my folder would be dismissed, my cameras would be called paranoid, and my sister would deliver her greatest performance yet as the wronged victim of her jealous sister's accusations. But sitting in that car, Marcus's hand steady on mine as we parked outside my childhood home, I still believed in justice. I still thought family meant something deeper than blood, that love could overcome willful blindness. Those beliefs would shatter before the night ended, leaving me to rebuild my understanding of family from scratch, while Madison prepared her final, most devastating blow. My father's 60th birthday should have been a celebration. Mom had insisted on a formal dinner at their house, complete with catered food and her best china. I arrived early to help set up, hoping the festive atmosphere might make my family more receptive to the evidence I carried in my bag. The dining room looked elegant with silver candlesticks and fresh flowers adorning the table. Mom bustled around, adjusting place settings while humming tunelessly, her mood lighter than I'd seen in weeks. For a moment, I let myself hope this evening might bridge the growing chasm between us. Madison swept in an hour before dinner wearing a flowing dress that emphasized her midsection. She moved differently, one hand protectively cradling her stomach as she settled into a chair with exaggerated care. Mom immediately fussed over her fetching pillows and water while shooting meaningful glances at Dad. Marcus arrived precisely at 6, carrying an expensive bottle of wine for my father and flowers for my mother. His genuine warmth met with cool politeness, their reception of him a stark contrast to how they'd greeted Madison's string of questionable boyfriends over the years. We gathered in the living room for appetizers, conversation stilted despite the celebratory occasion. I watched Madison sip water while everyone else enjoyed wine, her performance of delicate health obvious to anyone paying attention. The evidence folder weighed heavy in my bag, but I wanted to wait until after dinner to avoid ruining Dad's birthday entirely. Halfway through the main course, Madison stood suddenly tapping her water glass with a spoon. The theatrical gesture commanded everyone's attention as she beamed around the table. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight since it's Dad's special day," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I can't keep this joy inside any longer. I'm pregnant. You're going to be grandparents." The explosion of happiness from my parents was immediate and absolute. Mom actually shrieked, rushing to embrace Madison, while Dad's face transformed with pure joy. They peppered her with questions about due dates and morning sickness, while I sat frozen processing this unexpected development. "Congratulations," I offered when the initial frenzy died down. "Who's the father? Our wedding plans in the works." Madison's expression hardened. "Not everyone needs a ring to validate their relationships, Bria. Some of us focus on creating life instead of checking boxes for societal approval." The attack was so unexpected I actually laughed. "Madison, I'm genuinely happy for you. There's no need to turn this into a competition." "Competition?" Her voice rose dramatically. "You announce your engagement at the worst possible time for me, and now you can't even let me have one moment of joy without making it about you." "I didn't make it about me." I asked a normal question that any sister would ask. Mom intervened, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Bria, please. Your sister is sharing wonderful news. Can't you be supportive without interrogating her?" Marcus cleared his throat, his diplomatic nature attempting to diffuse the situation. "We're both very happy for Madison. A new baby is always cause for celebration." Dad's face darkened as he turned to Marcus. "Nobody asked for your input. This is a family matter." "Actually, Bria is my family," Marcus responded quietly but firmly, "or will be soon. I won't sit silently while she's attacked for expressing normal congratulations." The word "attacked" triggered Madison's theatrical tears. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking as Mom rushed to comfort her. Between sobs, she accused me of jealousy of being unable to accept that she might have something special in her life. The irony was breathtaking. Madison had systematically attacked my career, my relationship, and my safety. Yet somehow I was the villain for asking about her baby's father. The gaslighting was so complete, so masterfully executed, that even I began questioning whether I'd been insensitive. "Perhaps we should go," I suggested, standing to gather our things. "Sit down," Dad commanded. "We're not finished here. You owe your sister an apology." "For what?" "For congratulating her. For asking normal questions. I'm not apologizing for being a concerned sister." Madison's tears miraculously stopped as she fixed me with a calculating stare. "You're not concerned. You're bitter that I'm giving Mom and Dad their first grandchild. You can't stand that for once the attention isn't on perfect Bria and her perfect life." My patience finally snapped. "Perfect. You've been sabotaging my life for weeks. My work computer, my car breaking into my apartment. I have it all on camera. Madison, I know it's you." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's face cycled through emotions before settling on wounded innocence. Mom and Dad exchanged looks of disbelief, but not the kind I'd hoped for. They didn't believe Madison capable of such acts. They thought I was lying. I pulled out my folder of evidence, spreading photos and screenshots across the table. Here's the malware analysis from my IT department showing targeted attacks. Here's security footage of someone who knows exactly where cameras are positioned. Here's time-stamped video of someone entering my apartment with a key. Dad barely glanced at the evidence before pushing it aside. These prove nothing. Some grainy footage of a person in dark clothes. This could be anyone. Who else would have a key to my apartment? Who else would know my work computer login? Who else benefits from destroying my reputation? Madison's performance reached new heights as she clutched her stomach. The stress, my baby. How can you do this to me in my condition? Mom immediately went into protective mode. That's enough, Bria. You're upsetting your pregnant sister with these wild accusations. I think you should leave. Wild accusations. She literally told me she'd make sure my wedding never happened. Madison gasped dramatically. I never said that, Bria. I know you're struggling with my pregnancy announcement, but making up lies about me is cruel. Maybe you should talk to someone about these paranoid fantasies. The gaslighting was so smooth, so perfectly executed, that I found myself speechless. My own family was watching evidence of crimes against me and choosing to believe I was either lying or delusional rather than accept Madison's guilt. Marcus stood gently taking my arm. We're leaving. This is clearly not a productive conversation. As we gathered the scattered evidence, a knock at the door interrupted the toxic scene. Madison's boyfriend, Jake, entered without waiting for an answer, his expression tense as he surveyed the dramatic tableau. Jake baby Madison cooed, but he didn't move toward her. His eyes found mine instead, something urgent in his expression. Bria, could I talk to you outside, just for a minute? Madison's mask slipped for just a moment, panic flashing across her features. Jake, honey, we're in the middle of a family dinner. Whatever it is can wait. No, it can't. He turned back to me. Please, you need to hear this. Against the protests of my parents and Madison's increasingly frantic attempts to stop him, I followed Jake onto the front porch. Marcus came with me, protective instincts on high alert. Jake ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling with what he needed to say. She's not pregnant, he said finally. We broke up 2 weeks ago when I found out she'd been stealing money from my apartment. But that's not the worst part. My heart raced as pieces clicked into place. What's the worst part? She's been planning something big to destroy you. I heard her on the phone with someone talking about planting drugs and getting you arrested. I thought it was just angry talk, but then she started asking me about my cousin who deals. Bria, she's serious. She blames you for everything wrong in her life. The blood drained from my face. When is she planning this? I don't know, but soon. She kept saying something about before your wedding, making sure you'd never make it to the altar. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was scared, confused. But when I heard she was claiming to be pregnant using that as manipulation, I couldn't stay quiet. Marcus pulled out his phone, ready to call the police, but I stopped him. We needed more than the word of Madison's ex-boyfriend. We needed to catch her in the act or find concrete evidence of her plan. Jake promised to send any text messages or recordings he had before disappearing into the night, clearly relieved to have unburdened himself. We returned to find Madison in full victim mode, being comforted by our parents while spinning tales of Jake's instability and jealousy. According to her new narrative, he couldn't handle her pregnancy with another man's child, which is why he was spreading lies about her. Another man I couldn't help asking, Madison, you just let Mom and Dad assume Jake was the father. Her tears started again. It's complicated, okay? Not that you'd understand. Perfect Bria with her perfect fiancé wouldn't know about messy situations. We left without another word, the evidence folder tucked uselessly under my arm. In the car, Marcus gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, his usual calm shattered by the evening's revelations. She's dangerous, Bria. Actually dangerous. We need to go to the police ourselves, tell them about the threat. With what my family's testimony that I'm a jealous sister, making false accusations, Jake's word against hers when she's already painted him as a bitter ex, we need actual evidence of her drug plan. Then we get it. We set up more cameras, hire a private investigator, whatever it takes. I won't let her hurt you. That night, as we lay in bed processing the disaster of dinner, my phone buzzed with messages from Jake. Screenshots of conversations where Madison discussed her plan in vague terms, careful not to explicitly state her intentions, but clear enough to anyone reading between the lines. References to teaching me a lesson, making sure I understood consequences, and ominous mentions of friends who could help her acquire what she needed. The messages painted a picture of calculated planning driven by years of resentment. In Madison's mind, I'd stolen her life simply by existing. Every achievement of mine diminished her. My engagement was the final straw proof that I would always have what she couldn't. Her fake pregnancy was both manipulation and wish fulfillment, a desperate grab for the attention and priority she felt I'd stolen. Marcus held me as I cried, not from fear, but from grief. The family I'd tried so hard to be part of had chosen Madison's lies over my truth. They would rather believe I was paranoid and vindictive than accept their golden child was capable of evil. That willful blindness would soon make them accomplices to something far worse than anything we'd imagined. As sleep finally claimed me, I made a decision. I would not be a victim of Madison's schemes. If she wanted war, I would defend myself with every resource available. The little girl who'd spent years trying to earn her family's love was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that sometimes the family you choose is more real than the one you're given. The evidence folder sat on our dresser, a monument to futile hope that truth alone could overcome willful blindness. Soon I would learn that Madison's plan was already in motion, the drugs already procured, the stage already set. The birthday dinner hadn't been disrupted by my accusations as I'd feared. Instead, it had given Madison the perfect cover story, a jealous sister making wild claims just as poor pregnant Madison was trying to share her joy. Every piece of her plan clicked into place with terrifying precision. While I gathered evidence of past crimes, she prepared to commit her masterpiece. The family dinner disaster wasn't a setback for Madison. It was exactly what she needed. Now when the police came, my parents would already be primed to believe I was unstable, jealous, and capable of anything. 3 weeks after the disastrous birthday dinner, my professional life took an unexpected turn. Despite the temporary suspension of my Greenwood Project Authority, my work had caught the attention of Hartfield International, a global architecture firm headquartered in New York. The email arrived on a Thursday morning marked confidential and addressed from their chief design officer personally. "Dear Ms. Walker," it read, "your innovative approach to sustainable urban housing has come to our attention through your Greenwood project proposals. We have an immediate opening for Director of Sustainable Architecture in our New York office. This position would involve leading our entire East Coast Green Initiative with a team of 40 designers under your supervision. The compensation package reflects the seniority of this role, $400,000 base salary, plus performance bonuses, and full relocation assistance." I read the email 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding something. Directors at Hartfield were typically industry veterans with 20 years of experience. At 28, this opportunity would catapult my career forward by a decade. My hands shook as I called Marcus, who was equally stunned by the offer. "This is it, Bria. This is your chance to start fresh away from your family's toxicity. We could build our life in New York without their shadow hanging over everything." The interview process moved at lightning speed. Video calls with senior leadership confirmed their serious interest. They'd been tracking my work for months, particularly impressed by my innovative water reclamation designs and community-integrated green spaces. By Friday afternoon, I had a formal offer letter that exceeded even the initial email's promises. That weekend, I wrestled with the decision. Leaving Chicago meant leaving everything familiar, but it also meant escaping Madison's escalating campaign. Marcus had already reached out to hospitals in New York, finding opportunities that matched or exceeded his current position. We spent Saturday touring apartments, virtually imagining our new life 3 states away from my family's dysfunction. Sunday evening, I made the mistake of sharing my news with my parents. I'd hoped the physical distance might actually improve our relationship, allowing them to miss me enough to appreciate what they'd pushed away. Once again, I underestimated the depths of their enabling. New York Mom's voice carried disapproval through the phone. "Bria, that's so far. What about family? What about being here for your sister during her pregnancy?" The pregnancy that Jake had confirmed was fake. I bit my tongue, knowing that particular truth would never be believed. Mom, this is an incredible opportunity. Director level at one of the most prestigious firms in the world. I thought you'd be proud. Proud you're abandoning your family when we need you most. Madison's been having complications with the pregnancy. She needs her sister's support, not your jealousy-driven escape to New York. I haven't seen or spoken to Madison since Dad's birthday. How exactly am I supporting her now? A pause suggested Mom was crafting her manipulation carefully. Well, we'd hoped this silly feud would blow over. Sisters fight, but family stays together. Taking a job across the country feels very final, very selfish. The conversation deteriorated from there, with accusations of my selfishness and reminders of everything they'd done for me. Adoption was mentioned twice, subtle reminders that I should be grateful for any family at all. By the time I hung up, my excitement about New York had been tainted with guilt I didn't deserve to feel. Monday morning brought a surprise that should have warned me something was wrong. Madison appeared at my apartment door carrying coffee and pastries, her face arranged in an expression of contrition. The security footage later would show she'd been waiting outside for an hour, timing her arrival for when Marcus had left for his early surgery. "Can we talk?" she asked, looking vulnerable and young. "I hate how we left things at Dad's birthday. You're my sister, and if you're really leaving for New York, I don't want this anger between us." Every instinct screamed danger, but the part of me that still hoped for genuine family connection let her in. She settled on my couch, maintaining her pregnancy performance with careful movements and protective gestures toward her supposedly growing belly. "I heard about the Hartfield offer. That's incredible, Bria. You deserve recognition for your talent." Her words seemed genuine, catching me off guard. I know I haven't been the best sister. Jealousy is ugly, and I've let it poison our relationship. The confession was so unexpected, I found myself listening despite my better judgment. Madison spoke about feeling inadequate always compared to my achievements, struggling to find her own identity beyond being the family disappointment. Her therapy speak was polished, hitting all the right notes of accountability and growth. "I want to do better." She continued, tears threatening but not quite falling. "Maybe distance will help us both. You can build your life without feeling guilty about outshining me, and I can finally grow up without you as my excuse for failure." We talked for 2 hours, the longest civil conversation we'd had in years. Madison asked about the job, seeming genuinely interested in the sustainable architecture initiatives I'd be leading. She even offered to help me pack, suggesting we could use the time to rebuild our relationship before I left. The performance was flawless, every word calculated to lower my defenses, to make me believe she'd turned a corner. When she left, I felt lighter, hopeful that my departure might actually catalyze positive change in our family dynamic. I even called Marcus to share the breakthrough, though he remained skeptical. Tuesday flew by in a blur of resignation letters and transition meetings. My colleagues at Preston threw an impromptu farewell party, expressing genuine sadness at losing me while celebrating my incredible opportunity. David Preston himself pulled me aside, congratulating me on the Hartfield position and apologizing for ever doubting my integrity during the anonymous accusation investigation. Wednesday. Madison arrived as promised to help pack. She brought lunch from my favorite deli and worked efficiently wrapping dishes in newspaper while sharing funny memories from our childhood. The nostalgic atmosphere almost made me forget years of manipulation and recent sabotage. "You know, I found some of your old stuff in the attic," Madison mentioned casually while packing books. "Journals from high school photo albums, that kind of thing. I put them in your old room if you want to grab them before you leave." The sentimental pull was strong. Those journals contained years of thoughts and dreams, reminders of who I'd been before family dysfunction shaped my adult life. I made a mental note to stop by my parents' house before the move, grateful Madison had thought to save them. Thursday morning shattered the illusion of family reconciliation. I woke to dozens of missed calls from Hartfield's HR department. My stomach dropped as I returned the most recent, praying this wasn't what I feared. Ms. Walker, the HR director's voice was cold professional. We need to discuss the serious criminal allegations that have come to our attention. I assume you're aware of the federal investigation into embezzlement and corporate espionage at your current firm. Federal investigation? There's no investigation. What are you talking about? We received detailed documentation yesterday evening showing you as the primary subject of an FBI probe into stolen intellectual property. The evidence included surveillance footage, financial records, and witness testimonies. Given the serious nature of these allegations, we have no choice but to rescind our offer. My protests fell on deaf ears. The documentation they'd received was too comprehensive, too official-looking to be questioned. They wished me luck resolving my legal troubles and ended the call with finality that left no room for appeal. I immediately called Preston's office confirming what I already knew: no federal investigation existed. The FBI doesn't announce investigations to potential employers through anonymous emails. But the damage was done. Hartfield had already announced internally that they were withdrawing the offer, making reversal impossible without looking foolish. James from IT analyzed the emails Hartfield forwarded. The technical sophistication exceeded even the previous attacks on my computer. Whoever created the fake federal documents had serious skills and resources. The digital trail led through dozens of proxy servers before disappearing entirely. Madison called that afternoon, her voice full of concern about my lost opportunity. She offered to postpone her own plans to stay in Chicago and support me through this difficult time. The timing of her call, just hours after my life-changing opportunity evaporated, was too convenient to be coincidence. Marcus came home early, finding me surrounded by half-packed boxes and shattered dreams. He held me while I cried, not just for the lost job, but for the final destruction of any hope that Madison might change. The sister who'd helped me pack, who'd shared memories and deli sandwiches, had simultaneously orchestrated the complete annihilation of my future. "We need to leave anyway," Marcus suggested. "Maybe not New York, but somewhere. She won't stop Bria. This is escalation, not de-escalation." I knew he was right, but leaving felt like admitting defeat. Running away while Madison claimed victory, spinning stories about her unstable sister who'd lost a major job due to criminal behavior. My reputation in Chicago's architecture community would be forever tainted by whispers of federal investigations that never existed. That evening, Madison texted about finding more belongings in my old room. Photo albums from family vacations, she claimed. Awards and certificates from high school. The pull of nostalgia combined with anger made me reckless. I decided to visit my parents' house one last time, partly to retrieve memories, but mostly to confront them with evidence of Madison's latest destruction. Marcus insisted on coming along, unwilling to let me walk into what he correctly sensed was a trap, but neither of us imagined how elaborate Madison's plan had become. While I grieved my lost opportunity, she was putting final touches on a scheme months in the making. The helpful sister act, the packing assistance, even the sentimental belongings in my old room, all served a darker purpose. The job offer had threatened Madison's narrative. If I moved to New York, succeeded on a larger stage, built a life completely independent of family dysfunction, it would prove that I wasn't the problem. She couldn't allow that. My success had to be reframed as criminal behavior, my achievements tainted with suspicion, my future crushed under the weight of false allegations. Later, I would wonder if there ever was a real Hartfield offer, or if the entire opportunity had been manufactured as part of Madison's plan. The sophistication required suggested accomplices, people with skills beyond Madison's capability. But at that moment, sitting among moving boxes that would never make it to New York, I only knew that my sister had won another round in a war I'd never wanted to fight. The invitation to collect my belongings from my childhood room seemed innocent enough. One last visit to gather memories before starting fresh, somewhere else, even if New York was no longer possible. Madison had seemed so genuine in her regret, so authentic in her desire to make peace before I left. The performance deserved an award, and in a way she'd already written her acceptance speech. Friday arrived with the weight of finished dreams and new beginnings that would never materialize. I dressed carefully for the visit to my parents' house, professional but not formal, wanting to appear composed despite the chaos of my week. Marcus adjusted his schedule to accompany me, protective instincts on high alert after the week's devastation. As we drove toward Wilmette for what would be the last time as a free woman, I carried a folder of new evidence about the fake FBI documents. Surely this time, faced with proof of Madison's escalating criminal behavior, my parents would have to acknowledge the truth. Hope it seems dies harder than dreams. The house looked peaceful in the Friday morning light, no hint of the ambush waiting inside. Madison's car wasn't in the driveway, which should have been my first warning. She'd baited the trap and disappeared, leaving others to spring it, while maintaining her own alibi elsewhere. The helpful sister who'd found my old belongings was about to reveal her true nature in the most devastating way possible. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as Marcus and I drove toward my parents' house. The lost New York opportunity still stung, but I was determined to retrieve my belongings and close this chapter of my life. We'd already started researching opportunities in Seattle and Portland cities, far enough from Chicago to escape Madison's reach. Something felt different the moment we parked. The house seemed too quiet, no movement behind the curtains that usually twitched whenever a car approached. Madison's absence didn't surprise me anymore. She'd perfected the art of creating chaos while maintaining plausible deniability elsewhere. "Your parents' cars are here," Marcus observed, studying the driveway. "Maybe they're just having a quiet morning." I used my key to enter, calling out a greeting that echoed through seemingly empty rooms. The house smelled of coffee and something else, a chemical scent I couldn't identify. We found my parents in the kitchen, sitting rigidly at the table with untouched mugs before them. Mom's face looked pale, drawn in ways I'd never seen before. Dad stared at his hands, shoulders tense with an emotion I couldn't read. Neither looked up when we entered, their silence more unnerving than any confrontation. "We need to talk about Madison." I began setting my evidence folder on the counter. "She's destroyed my career with fake FBI documents. I have proof of everything." "Your room is how you left it," Mom interrupted, her voice mechanical. "Your things are in the closet. Take whatever you want." The dismissal stung, but their strange behavior worried me more than angered me. They looked afraid, not defiant, like actors forced to play roles they didn't understand while someone watched from the wings. "Is everything okay? You both seem upset." Dad finally met my eyes, and I saw something that looked almost like regret. "Just get your things and go, Bria. Please, it's better if you leave quickly." A chill ran down my spine at his tone. Marcus stepped closer to me, his medical training recognizing signs of distress that went beyond family drama. He started to speak, but I touched his arm, suddenly desperate to leave this house that felt more like a trap with each passing second. We climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, finding it exactly as promised. Boxes lined one wall, labeled in Madison's handwriting photos, awards, journals. I grabbed the nearest box while Marcus collected another, both of us moving with increasing urgency. That's when we heard the sirens. They started distant but grew louder, closer until it was clear they were approaching our street. My parents must have heard them too, because sudden footsteps pounded up the stairs. Mom appeared in my doorway, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "She said she'd expose everything if we didn't help. The taxes, Robert's embezzlement from the company. We'd lose everything." Before I could process her words, the front door exploded open. Police voices shouted commands as boots thundered through the house. Marcus grabbed my hand, pulling me toward him as officers appeared in the hallway, weapons drawn. "Bria Walker, step away from the boxes and put your hands where we can see them." Everything moved in slow motion. Officers swarmed the room while one approached with handcuffs. I stood frozen, unable to comprehend how collecting photo albums had turned into an arrest scene. Marcus tried to intervene, demanding to know what was happening, but they pushed him aside. "We have a warrant to search these premises based on credible reports of drug trafficking." A detective appeared, holding up an official-looking document. "Ms. Walker, you're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." "That's impossible. I haven't done anything." Where are these supposed drugs? The detective nodded to an officer who was searching the boxes I'd been about to carry out. With theatrical precision, he pulled out a dresser drawer I recognized from my old furniture set, now inexplicably among the belongings Madison had gathered. Inside, wrapped in plastic, lay several packages of white powder. My legs nearly buckled. The setup was so obvious, so clearly planted, yet the officers treated it as a major bust. They photographed everything, bagged evidence, and read me my rights while I struggled to form coherent protests. That's not mine. Someone put that there. Test it for fingerprints, you won't find mine. The detective's expression remained professionally neutral. We'll conduct a full investigation, ma'am. Right now, you need to come with us. As they led me past my parents, the final piece of Madison's plan clicked into place. Mom sobbed openly while Dad looked everywhere but at me. They weren't just witnesses to my arrest. They were participants. You knew I said stopping despite the officer's attempt to keep me moving. You knew she was planning this. Mom's sobs grew louder, but she nodded. Madison had been here earlier, they admitted through broken words. She'd brought the drawer, claiming it contained old keepsakes she'd found. They'd watched her place it among my things, knowing what it contained, knowing I'd be arrested when I came to collect my belongings. She has evidence, Dad said hollowly, of everything we've done wrong over the years, financial crimes that would destroy us. If we didn't cooperate, she'd turn us in too. So you chose to sacrifice me instead. The words hung in the air as officers resumed leading me away. Marcus followed, promising to call lawyers to fix this to make sure truth prevailed. But as I sat in the back of the police car watching my childhood home disappear, I understood the depth of Madison's victory. She'd found the perfect leverage against our parents, turning their own crimes into weapons against me. Their fear of exposure outweighed whatever parental love they might have felt. Given the choice between protecting their biological daughter or their adopted one, the decision had been swift and merciless. The ride to the police station passed in a blur of disbelief and growing anger, not just at Madison, whose capacity for evil no longer surprised me, but at the parents who'd raised me only to betray me so completely. They'd watched their daughter plant evidence to frame me and chosen silence over truth. At the station, I was processed like any other criminal. Fingerprints, photographs, humiliating searches, and endless questions I could barely answer through my shock. The drugs tested positive for cocaine, a significant amount that elevated charges beyond simple possession. The public defender assigned to my case seemed overworked and uninterested until I mentioned discovering my adoption recently. Something in his expression shifted as I explained the family dynamics, the favoritism, the escalating sabotage from my sister. Adoption, you said. Recently discovered. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. What was your biological mother's name if you know it? I don't know. The adoption was closed and my parents never told me anything beyond the fact that I was adopted. He studied me intently, then excused himself from the interrogation room. Through the window, I watched him make several animated phone calls, his demeanor changing from bored civil servant to something more engaged. When he returned 20 minutes later, he wasn't alone. A well-dressed man in his 50s entered carrying an expensive leather briefcase and radiating the kind of confidence that came from winning more cases than he lost. He dismissed the public defender with a nod and settled across from me. Ms. Walker, my name is James Morrison. I'm not actually a public defender. I'm a private investigator hired by someone very interested in your welfare. We need to discuss your adoption and how it connects to what's happening to you now. The revelation stunned me into silence. He continued pulling out documents that would change everything I thought I knew about my origins and the family that had raised me, only to betray me so thoroughly. I've been watching your situation for months, following a paper trail that began with irregularities in your adoption records. The woman who hired me has been searching for you for 25 years. She suspected something was wrong when news of your recent troubles reached her attention. Who hired you who's been looking for me? Your biological mother, a woman who was told you died at birth but never believed it. She's been fighting to find you ever since, and what we've uncovered about your adoption explains why your adoptive family might be so willing to sacrifice you now." The room spun as pieces of a larger puzzle began forming. My adoption hadn't been the legal above-board process I'd always assumed. There were secrets buried in those sealed records crimes that went beyond Madison's current frame-up and my parents' financial indiscretions. "We're bringing in a proper defense team," James assured me. "The best lawyers money can buy. But I need you to understand something. This goes deeper than sibling rivalry. Your adoptive parents have been living in fear of exposure for decades, and Madison found the perfect way to exploit that fear." Through the observation window, I saw Marcus arguing with officers demanding information about my bail hearing. His fierce loyalty was the only bright spot in this nightmare. Soon he'd meet the team assembling to defend me, to expose not just Madison's current crimes, but the original sin that made them all possible. As I waited for processing, the full weight of betrayal settled on my shoulders. The people who'd raised me had participated in my framing rather than face consequences for their own actions. They'd chosen self-preservation over protecting the daughter they'd claimed to want so badly they'd adopted her. But if James Morrison was right, even that narrative was false. The adoption itself was tainted by crimes that would soon come to light. Madison thought she'd orchestrated my destruction, but she'd actually triggered an investigation that would expose secrets darker than any of us imagined. The drugs in that drawer were meant to be my ending. Instead, they became the key that unlocked a past everyone thought safely buried. My biological mother had never stopped searching, never accepted the lies told about my fate. Now, with my freedom on the line, she was ready to reveal everything. The frame-up was perfect except for one detail Madison couldn't have known. Someone with resources and determination had been waiting for exactly this moment to strike back. The war my sister started was about to expand beyond our family, drawing in players she never knew existed. As they led me to a holding cell to await arraignment, I thought about the boxes of memories I'd never collected. Photos of a childhood built on lies, awards earned while living under constant comparison to Madison journals, filled with desperate attempts to earn love that was always conditional. Maybe it was better those boxes remained behind artifacts of a life I was about to leave completely behind. The holding cell smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. I sat on the metal bench, knees drawn to my chest, trying to process how my life had imploded so spectacularly. Through the bars, I could hear Marcus arguing with desk officers, his voice growing more frustrated as they stonewalled his requests for information. Other women occupied the cell, most avoiding eye contact, while one younger woman sobbed quietly in the corner. I wondered if any of them had been betrayed by their own families, or if that particular cruelty was mine alone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving, counting down hours that felt like days. James Morrison returned after what must have been 2 hours, though time moved strangely in custody. He wasn't alone. A woman in her early 50s accompanied him, her presence commanding despite her modest gray suit. She carried herself like someone accustomed to courtrooms and conflict. Sarah Chen, she introduced herself, offering a firm handshake through the bars. "I'm your new attorney. James has briefed me on the family situation, but I need to hear your version of events, particularly this morning's arrest." I recounted everything: Madison's sabotage campaign, the fake pregnancy announcement, the lost job opportunity, and finally the planted drugs. Sarah took notes on a legal pad, occasionally exchanging meaningful glances with James. When I finished, she set down her pen with deliberate precision. "Your sister made 2 critical mistakes. First, she involved your parents as witnesses, creating a conspiracy that can be unraveled. Second, she triggered something much larger than she intended. Tell me, what do you know about your adoption?" "Almost nothing. My parents told me when I was 10 that I was adopted, but claimed the records were sealed. They said my biological mother was a teenager who couldn't care for me, nothing more." James pulled out a tablet, swiping through documents. "Your biological mother was indeed a teenager, but not the desperate young girl your adoptive parents described. Eleanor Matthews was 17 from a prominent political family. When she became pregnant, her parents sent her to a private facility to hide the pregnancy and preserve their reputation. My heart raced as information I'd craved my entire life finally emerged. What happened to her? Why was I adopted? According to official records, you died during childbirth. That's what Eleanor was told what her family believed. She was sedated during labor and woke to news of your death. But she never saw a body, never got closure. It haunted her. Sarah picked up the narrative. Eleanor went on to law school, driven by a need for justice she couldn't name. She's now a federal judge, one of the youngest ever appointed. But she never stopped investigating your supposed death. Hospital records didn't match, witnesses disappeared, and the doctor who delivered you lost his license 2 years later for illegal adoptions. Illegal adoptions. The words hung heavy in the stale air. My entire life had been built on criminal foundations, which explained so much about my parents' behavior. They'd known their parenthood was illegitimate, lived in fear of exposure for 28 years. 3 months ago, James continued, Eleanor's investigators found a paper trail connecting your adoptive parents to the disgraced doctor. Money changed hands, documents were forged, and a healthy baby girl was sold to a couple desperate for a child but unable to adopt through legal channels. Sold, not adopted, not chosen, not rescued. Sold like property to people who'd raised me knowing they had no legitimate claim to call themselves my parents. The truth burned worse than any of Madison's schemes. A guard appeared, keys jangling. Walker, you're being transferred for arraignment. Your lawyer can accompany you. The walk to the courthouse basement holding area revealed the full circus Madison had created. News vans lined the street, reporters shouting questions about the elementary school teacher arrested for drug trafficking. Apparently, my former principals had been contacted, adding their shock to the narrative of a respected educator hiding a criminal life. In the attorney consultation room, Sarah outlined our strategy. The arraignment was straightforward: enter a not guilty plea, argue for reasonable bail, given my lack of criminal history and community ties. The real battle would come later, dismantling Madison's scheme piece by piece while revealing the deeper crimes. Your biological mother is already working behind the scenes, Sarah explained. She has connections throughout the legal system, all eager to help expose this travesty. But we need to handle this delicately. If Madison realizes we know about the illegal adoption, she might destroy evidence or flee. What about my parents? They actively participated in framing me. Sarah's expression hardened. They made their choice. We'll offer them one opportunity to cooperate fully in exchange for leniency on the frame-up charges. But the adoption crimes are federal, beyond our ability to negotiate. Eleanor wants justice for what was stolen from her. The courtroom was packed when they brought me in, shackled like a violent criminal. I searched the gallery for familiar faces, finding Marcus in the front row beside someone I didn't recognize, a woman with graying blonde hair and green eyes that matched mine perfectly in shade, if not in shape. She sat rigid, hands clasped, watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Madison occupied a back row, tissue pressed to her face in a performance of sisterly anguish. Our parents flanked her, mom crying genuine tears, while Dad stared straight ahead. They'd chosen their side, definitively protecting the daughter they'd created, while sacrificing the one they'd stolen. The prosecutor painted me as a calculated criminal who'd used my teaching position to hide drug trafficking operations. The evidence seemed damning: substantial cocaine found in my possession, parents confirming concerns about my behavior, a sister reluctantly admitting she'd suspected my involvement with drugs. Sarah destroyed their narrative methodically. She highlighted the convenient timing of the discovery, the fact that I'd announced my intention to collect belongings just days before the absence of my fingerprints on the drug packaging. She raised questions about why parents concerned about drug dealing would wait for an anonymous tip instead of addressing it directly. Your Honor, this is a clear case of planted evidence designed to destroy my client's life. Ms. Walker has no criminal history, exemplary employment records, and was about to accept a prestigious position in New York before these false allegations surfaced. We request reasonable bail and expedited discovery to expose this frame-up. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, studied me throughout the arguments. She'd seen countless defendants claim innocence, but something in our presentation gave her pause. After deliberation that felt eternal, she set bail at $50,000 with conditions: surrender my passport, remain in Illinois, and have no contact with witnesses, including my family. As they processed my release, James pulled me aside with urgent news. The cocaine matched a batch seized 2 weeks ago in a bust connected to Madison's social circle. One of her friends, the tech expert who'd helped with the cyber attacks, had been arrested with identical packaging. The trail led directly back to my sister. We also found this. He showed me security footage from a camera across from my parents' house. Madison arriving at 3 a.m. the morning of my arrest carrying a drawer-sized box. She had her own key entered without knocking and left empty-handed 30 minutes later. The timestamp proved she'd planted the evidence hours before I arrived. The evidence was damning, but my heart broke for different reasons. My parents had watched her plant those drugs knowing I'd be arrested and said nothing. They'd sacrificed their adopted daughter to protect their biological one, choosing Madison, despite knowing she was guilty, and I was innocent. Marcus posted bail using savings we'd earmarked for our wedding and honeymoon. As we left the courthouse, he shielded me from reporters screaming questions about teaching children while dealing drugs. The narrative had already taken hold, my reputation shredded based on lies my own family supported. Eleanor approached us in the parking garage, having waited discreetly until we were alone. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable, despite nearly 3 decades of separation. She studied my face like someone memorizing a miracle, tears, threatening, but not quite falling. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for all of it. For not fighting harder when they told me you died. For taking so long to find you. For not preventing this nightmare." The urge to fall into her arms warred with 28 years of learned behavior. This stranger was my mother, while the woman who'd raised me had helped frame me for crimes I didn't commit. The reversal left me unmoored, uncertain how to process biological connection versus experiential betrayal. "We'll talk properly soon," Eleanor promised. "Right now, Sarah and her team need to focus on clearing your name. But I want you to know I've never stopped loving you, never stopped searching. When this is over, if you're willing, I'd like the chance to be part of your life." She left with dignity, intact, understanding my need for space while processing revelations that rewrote my entire history. Marcus drove us home in silence, letting me stare out the window at a city that suddenly felt foreign. Every landmark held memories of a childhood built on lies, a family that was never truly mine. The apartment felt safe after the chaos of custody, but evidence of the morning's trauma lingered. Half-packed boxes reminded me of the future stolen by Madison's schemes. My engagement ring caught the light proof that some relationships were real, even if my family connections had proven false. That night, Marcus held me while I finally broke down completely. Not just tears, but body-shaking sobs for the little girl who'd tried so hard to earn love from people who'd purchased her illegally. For the woman who'd believed family meant something deeper than blood, only to learn it meant nothing at all when self-preservation was at stake. Madison had won this battle successfully, framing me with our parents' help. But she'd also awakened forces beyond her control. Eleanor Matthews had resources, connections, and 28 years of grief transformed into determination. The biological mother Madison never knew existed was about to demonstrate what real family loyalty looked like. The war my sister declared was entering a new phase. While she celebrated her apparent victory, Sarah's team worked through the night building our counterattack. James traced financial records and digital footprints. Eleanor called in favors from decades in the legal system. And somewhere in federal databases, sealed adoption records were being prepared for revelation. Madison thought she'd destroyed my life with planted drugs and family betrayal. Instead, she'd given me something precious, the truth about where I came from and clarity about who truly deserved my loyalty. The arrest meant for my ending had become my beginning, the key to a past everyone thought safely buried and a future free from toxic obligations to people who'd proven themselves unworthy of the title family. Sarah Chen's law office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel that spoke of serious legal power. I sat in her conference room Monday morning surrounded by boxes of evidence and a team of associates who'd worked through the weekend. The view stretched across Chicago's skyline, but I couldn't appreciate its beauty while my freedom hung in the balance. "We've made significant progress." Sarah began gesturing to a wall covered in timelines and connection charts. "Your sister was careless in her confidence. She left digital breadcrumbs everywhere, starting with the cyber attacks on your workplace." A young associate named David pulled up financial records on the main screen. "Madison's been living far beyond her visible means. The $50,000 from your grandmother's fund only partially explains her spending. We tracked additional deposits totaling over $30,000 in the past 6 months, all cash, all immediately before major purchases." "Drug dealing?" Marcus asked from beside me, his hand steady on my back. "That's our working theory. She needed money to maintain her lifestyle and fund the elaborate frame-up. The tech expert she hired for the cyber attacks, Kevin Chen, no relation to me, was arrested 2 weeks ago with cocaine matching what was planted in your bedroom. He's already looking at serious time and might be willing to deal." James Morrison entered carrying coffee and a thick folder. "Morning, everyone. Jake Summers just left my office. Madison's ex-boyfriend has been incredibly helpful. He provided recordings of Madison discussing her plans, though she was careful never to explicitly state criminal intentions." He clicked play on a digital recorder. Madison's voice filled the room, slurred slightly from alcohol. "She thinks she's so perfect with her fancy job and doctor boyfriend, but I know things about our parents that would destroy them. They'll do whatever I say to keep their secrets safe. Bria won't know what hit her." Another recording. "The beautiful thing is she'll come running when I mention her old belongings. Sentimental fool never could resist family memories. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." My stomach churned hearing my sister's calculated cruelty laid bare. She'd played on my hope for family connection using my desire for belonging as a weapon against me. Every seemingly kind gesture had been part of an elaborate trap. Sarah nodded to another associate who pulled up text messages. "These are between Madison and Kevin Chen. She discusses needing something that would definitely send someone to prison. He replies with pricing for different quantities and mentions his cousin in narcotics could help with packaging that matches recent busts." The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed to understand the deeper crime. What about my adoption? How does that factor into Madison's plan? James and Sarah exchanged glances before Sarah responded. "Your adoption is both separate from and integral to Madison's scheme. She discovered the truth about 6 months ago while snooping through your parents' hidden documents. She's been blackmailing them ever since." He produced photocopies of old documents, bank transfers, and forged medical records. "Your biological mother, Eleanor Matthews, came from a prominent political family. When she became pregnant at 17, her parents sent her to the Serenity Home for Troubled Girls, ostensibly for her own protection." The name sent chills through me. I'd heard whispers about such places where unwed mothers were hidden away to preserve family reputations. Eleanor must have felt so alone, so powerless. "Dr. Harold Brennan ran a side business in illegal adoptions," James continued. "He'd convince vulnerable young women their babies had died, then sell the infants to desperate couples. Your adoptive parents paid $40,000 in 1996 money for you. They knew the adoption wasn't legal, but were desperate for a child. $40,000. The price tag on my life reduced me to commodity status. No wonder they'd always seemed fearful whenever adoption came up in conversation. They'd been living with the threat of exposure for my entire life. Eleanor never believed you died. She hired investigators, fought sealed records, and spent years searching. When she became a judge, she used her position to quietly investigate similar cases. She's helped expose dozens of illegal adoptions, always hoping one would lead to you. Sarah pulled up a photograph of Eleanor from a recent judicial ceremony. The resemblance was even more striking in professional lighting. Same green eyes, same determined set to the jaw. She looked like who I might become with another 20 years of fighting for justice. 3 months ago, one of Eleanor's investigators noticed a familiar name in Chicago arrest reports. Madison Walker, picked up for public intoxication, mentioned having a sister who was adopted. The investigator dug deeper, found your name, your photo. Eleanor knew immediately. She'd found me just as my life began falling apart. The timing felt cosmic, as if the universe decided I'd suffered enough pretense and deserved truth. But knowing my biological mother had been searching while I lived hours away felt like another loss, another theft of time we could have shared. "Why didn't she contact me directly?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "She wanted to be certain, and she didn't want to disrupt your life if you were happy." Sarah's expression softened. "When the cyber attacks started and she learned about the family dynamics, she realized you needed help. That's when she hired James to document everything and me to be ready when Madison inevitably escalated. They'd been watching, waiting, preparing for this moment. The thought should have felt invasive, but instead I felt protected. While my adoptive parents conspired against me, strangers who shared my blood had been working to save me." David interrupted with new information from his laptop. "I just got word from the prosecutor's office. They're facing pressure from reporters about the high-profile teacher arrest, but Judge Matthews has been making calls. Several prominent attorneys have suddenly expressed concern about rushed prosecution and potential civil rights violations." Eleanor was using her influence carefully, not enough to attract attention, but sufficient to slow the railroad job Madison had initiated. The system that had failed her 28 years ago was now bending to her will, protecting the daughter stolen at birth. "We need Jake to testify," Sarah stated. "His recordings are helpful, but his direct testimony about Madison's plans and fake pregnancy would be devastating to her credibility. Can you reach out, James?" "Already on it. He's scared but angry. Madison apparently stole about $8,000 from him over their relationship. He's ready to see her face consequences, especially knowing she was planning to frame an innocent person." The fake pregnancy particularly enraged him. Jake had wanted children, had been excited before discovering Madison's deception. She'd manipulated his dreams, just as she'd weaponized my hope for family, using people's best qualities against them. "What about my parents?" I had to ask, though their betrayal still burned. "Will they face charges for their part in this?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "That depends on their cooperation. We're preparing to approach them with evidence of both the frame-up and the illegal adoption. They can choose to testify against Madison and provide evidence of her blackmail, or they can go down with her." The choice seemed obvious from my perspective, but I'd underestimated their fear. 28 years of dreading exposure had warped their moral compass beyond recognition. They'd rather see me in prison than face consequences for buying a baby through criminal channels. "There's something else." James pulled out another file. "We've been investigating Madison's recent associates. She's been running with a dangerous crowd, people involved in drug distribution and cybercrime. We believe she got in over her head, owes money to people who don't accept excuses." "The frame-up might serve dual purposes," Sarah added, "removing you as a threat to her position while also potentially providing her with drug money through your supposed arrest. If she claimed you were her competition, your arrest might clear her debts." My sister had graduated from spoiled manipulator to actual criminal trading on connections that could destroy more than just my life. The escalation spoke to desperation beyond mere sibling rivalry. She was drowning in consequences of her own making, using me as a life raft. We spent the rest of the morning building our case, each piece of evidence adding weight to the truth. Kevin Chen's arrest record, Jake's recordings, financial trails, and timeline inconsistencies painted a clear picture of conspiracy. But knowing the truth and proving it in court were different challenges. Eleanor arrived after lunch, having cleared her schedule to meet with the legal team. She moved with quiet authority, greeting each person by name, thanking them for their work. When she reached me, she paused, seeming to drink in details she'd missed for decades. "May I?" She gestured to the chair beside mine. I nodded, still adjusting to her presence. Up close, I noticed laugh lines that suggested joy, despite the loss she'd carried. Her perfume was subtle, expensive, nothing like the heavy florals my adoptive mother favored. "I've wanted to ask you something," Eleanor said carefully. "Did they treat you well before this nightmare? Were you happy?" The question cut deeper than she could know. How could I explain a childhood of feeling less than of watching Madison receive unconditional love, while mine came with conditions? But there had been moments of happiness, times when I'd forgotten I was adopted, when the family felt real. "They weren't cruel," I said finally, "but I always knew I was different, less important. When Madison came along, it was clear who belonged and who was extra. I spent years trying to earn what she received freely. I never understood why until now." Eleanor's jaw tightened. If I'd found you sooner." "You found me when I needed you most. That has to count for something." She smiled, then the expression transforming her from federal judge to simply a mother reunited with her stolen child. "We have time now. After we clear your name, after Madison faces justice, we can build something new, if you're willing." I thought of the family photos still in my childhood room, artifacts of a life built on lies. Then I looked at this woman who'd never stopped searching, who'd assembled a legal team to save me from the family that had raised me. Blood might not guarantee loyalty, but Eleanor had proven hers through decades of determination. The investigation would continue, each thread pulled revealing more corruption. Madison had opened a box she couldn't close, triggering an examination that would expose every secret my adoptive parents had desperately hidden. The drugs in that drawer were meant to be my destruction. Instead, they'd become the catalyst for truth and the foundation for justice. As the meeting concluded and plans solidified for the next day's depositions, I felt something shifting inside me. The desperate need for my adoptive family's approval was fading, replaced by recognition of who truly deserved my loyalty. Madison had given me an unexpected gift through her cruelty-freedom from the obligation to love people who'd proven themselves unworthy of that love. Eleanor walked me to the elevator Judge Matthews temporarily set aside for a mother saying goodbye to her daughter after too brief a reunion. Tomorrow, she'd return to federal court while Sarah's team continued building our case. But tonight, she'd know exactly where I was no longer lost to lies, told in a hospital 28 years ago. Tuesday morning brought a breakthrough that shifted our entire case. David Park, Sarah's tech specialist, had spent 48 hours straight analyzing digital evidence with the focused intensity of someone who lived for puzzles. When I arrived at the law office with Marcus, David was practically vibrating with excitement. "I found it," he announced before we'd even sat down. "The smoking gun that connects everything." Madison thought she was clever using encrypted messaging apps, but she made one critical error. She backed up her phone to her laptop, and that laptop auto-synced to a cloud service she forgot she had. Sarah leaned forward, her usually composed expression showing rare animation. "Show us everything, David. Walk us through it chronologically." David connected his laptop to the conference room's main screen, pulling up a timeline that made my blood run cold. Starting 6 months ago, right after she discovered the illegal adoption documents, Madison began planning my destruction with methodical precision. Here's her first message to Kevin Chen. David highlighted the text. "I need someone with serious tech skills for a long-term project. Money is no object if you can guarantee discretion and results." The messages evolved from vague requests to specific criminal conspiracy. Madison detailed her plan in stages: first, undermine my professional reputation with cyber attacks. Second, isolate me from Marcus with fake evidence of cheating. Third, destroy my career opportunities. Finally, the frame-up that would remove me permanently. Look at this exchange from 2 months ago, David continued. Madison writes, the cocaine needs to match recent busts, so it looks like she's connected to known dealers. Kevin responds with photos of evidence bags and says, my cousin can get exactly what you need. Same batch they seized from the Riverside crew. My stomach churned seeing my sister's calculated cruelty laid out in digital black and white. She'd planned my destruction like a business project, complete with timelines and contingency plans. The Madison who'd cried at family dinners about feeling inadequate had simultaneously been orchestrating my downfall. James Morrison entered with Jake Summers in tow. Madison's ex-boyfriend looked haggard but determined, carrying a small backpack that he set carefully on the table. I brought everything Jake said, addressing Sarah. Text messages, voicemails, and something I didn't mention before, videos. Videos, Sarah's eyebrow raised. Madison liked to record herself when she was drunk, making what she called victory videos. She'd rant about her plans about Bria, about her parents. I saved them because they scared me, made me realize who I was really dating. He pulled out an external hard drive, handing it to David, who immediately began transferring files. The first video appeared on screen: Madison in her apartment, wine glass in hand, eyes glassy with intoxication and malice. Day 43 of Operation Sister Shutdown, she slurred to the camera. Little Miss Perfect has no idea what's coming. Daddy and Mommy are completely under my control now that I have their dirty adoption secrets. They'll do whatever I say to keep their crimes hidden. The timestamp showed 3 months ago, proving premeditation beyond any doubt. More videos followed, each one more damning. Madison detailed her partnership with Kevin Chen, bragged about the cyber attacks, and celebrated each successful sabotage of my life. One video stood out for its cold clarity despite her intoxication. Tomorrow, Bria gets the job offer from New York. She has no idea I helped orchestrate it through Kevin's connections. When we destroy that opportunity with fake federal investigations, she'll be crushed. The best part, she'll come crying to family for support, never knowing we're the ones who destroyed her. So the Hartfield offer was real, I asked, struggling to process this revelation. Sarah nodded grimly. Madison manipulated events from both ends. She had Kevin's hacker friends create buzz about your work in architectural forums where Hartfield recruiters lurk. They made the offer based on genuine interest in your talent. Then she destroyed it to maximize your pain. The cruelty took my breath away. She'd given me hope specifically to crush it, orchestrated my highest high to make the fall more devastating. Every moment of happiness I'd felt about that opportunity had been part of her sadistic game. David pulled up financial records next. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Madison's been getting payments from someone called the broker for the past 4 months. $50,000 in cryptocurrency, converted to cash through various channels. Want to guess what she was selling? Information about me, I guess, though nothing surprised me anymore. Close. Information about architectural projects you had access to. She was selling corporate secrets from Preston and Associates using the access she gained through hacking your computer. The FBI really is investigating corporate espionage, just not you. Madison's the target. The room fell silent as implications sank in. My sister had committed federal crimes that went far beyond framing me. She'd sold stolen corporate data, making her part of an espionage ring the FBI was actively investigating. Her plan to frame me suddenly looked like desperate misdirection from her own crimes. Jake shifted uncomfortably before speaking again. There's one more thing. The pregnancy lie wasn't random. Madison found out she can't have children about 4 months ago. Some medical issue she never fully explained. She became obsessed with the idea that Bria would have the family she couldn't. Another piece clicked into place. Madison's escalation coincided with learning about her infertility, adding another layer of resentment to our already toxic dynamic. In her mind, I'd stolen her parents' love, her achievements, and now her potential future children. Eleanor arrived as we were reviewing the evidence, bringing with her a federal prosecutor named Harrison Webb. His presence signaled the case was shifting from local frame-up to federal investigation. He reviewed our evidence with the practiced eye of someone who'd built careers on less. "This is remarkable," Harrison said finally. "We've been tracking the broker's network for 2 years without identifying the Chicago connection. Madison Walker just handed us a major breakthrough. In exchange for cooperation against the broker, we might offer her a deal." "No deals," Eleanor said firmly. "Not for framing my daughter. Madison Walker committed multiple federal crimes, including conspiracy to frame an innocent person for drug trafficking. She corrupted her parents into accomplices. No deals." Harrison looked between Eleanor and me, clearly weighing politics against justice. Judge Matthews, with respect to conviction against the broker, could shut down a major corporate espionage ring. Madison's testimony might be worth consideration. "Then get the broker another way," Sarah interjected. "We have enough evidence to convict Madison without any deals. She destroyed my client's reputation, career, and freedom. She doesn't get to walk away from that." The debate continued, but I found myself focused on a different revelation. The adoption documents James had spread across the table included medical records from my birth. One detail stood out: multiple births. I'd been a twin. "James," I interrupted the legal discussion. "These records show 2 births. What happened to the other baby?" The room fell silent. Eleanor's face paled as she studied the documents she'd apparently never seen in full detail. James quickly cross-referenced hospital records on his laptop, his expression growing increasingly grim. "According to this, you had a twin sister. The records show 1 infant death and 1 illegal adoption. But the death certificate has the same inconsistencies as your supposed death. Dr. Brennan might have sold both babies." "2 daughters." Eleanor's voice broke on the words. "He told me both died. I've been searching for 1 daughter when there might be 2. The revelation sent shockwaves through everyone present. If I had a twin somewhere, had she been raised, knowing she was adopted? Had she searched for biological family? The possibilities multiplied exponentially, adding new urgency to exposing Dr. Brennan's crimes. "We'll find her," James promised Eleanor. "If she's out there, we'll find her." But first, we had to deal with Madison and clear my name. David compiled our evidence into a comprehensive presentation for the prosecutor and judge. The digital trail alone would destroy Madison's credibility, but combined with Jake's testimony and the financial evidence, her frame-up would collapse completely. "There's enough here to arrest Madison immediately," Harrison conceded. "We'll coordinate with local police for the drug frame-up while building the federal case for corporate espionage and conspiracy. Your parents will also face charges unless they cooperate fully." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but you've only made things worse. Watch your back." The threat was clearly from Madison, already aware that her carefully constructed plan was unraveling. Marcus took my phone, showing it to Sarah, who immediately documented the threat. "She's panicking." "Good. Panicked people make mistakes, and Madison's about to make her biggest one yet." The meeting concluded with plans for Madison's arrest the following morning. Teams would simultaneously execute warrants at her apartment, our parents' house, and Kevin Chen's remaining associates. The scope had expanded far beyond sisterly rivalry into a federal investigation that would make headlines. As we prepared to leave, Eleanor pulled me aside. "When this is over, I'd like to help search for your sister. If she's out there, she deserves to know the truth, too. You both do." The possibility of a twin sister felt surreal after everything else. Had Madison known? Was that another secret she'd discovered and kept? The questions multiplied, but answers would have to wait until after tomorrow's arrests. That evening, Marcus and I sat in our apartment surrounded by legal documents and evidence photos. My life had been dissected and documented, every violation cataloged for court. But between the harsh realities lay Hope Eleanor, fighting for the daughter she'd never stopped loving, Sarah's team, working tirelessly for justice, and the truth finally emerging from decades of lies. Madison had triggered an avalanche she couldn't stop. Her plan to destroy me had instead exposed a network of crimes reaching back to my birth and forward to federal espionage. Tomorrow she'd face the consequences of her cruelty, while I'd finally be free from the toxic obligation to call her family. The digital trail had revealed more than just evidence of frame-up. It had shown the depth of Madison's hatred, the the calculated nature of her attacks and the federal crimes she'd committed while trying to destroy me. But it had also revealed strength. I didn't know existed biological family who'd never stopped searching chosen family, like Marcus, who'd never wavered, and legal allies who believed in justice. As I fell asleep that night, my phone buzzed with one final message, this time from Eleanor. "Sleep well, my daughter. Tomorrow we finish this." For the first time since my arrest, I believed those words completely. The preliminary hearing began at 9 sharp on a Thursday morning that promised justice or deeper disaster. I sat between Sarah Chen and Eleanor Matthews, drawing strength from their presence as the courtroom filled with spectators, reporters, and family members whose loyalties would soon be tested beyond breaking. Madison entered flanked by 2 attorneys her parents had hired her, appearance calculated for maximum sympathy. Gone was the designer clothing and perfect makeup, replaced by a conservative suit and minimal cosmetics that made her look younger, more vulnerable. She'd even added glasses I knew she didn't need, completing the transformation from party girl to persecuted innocent. My parents sat directly behind her, their faces showing strain from the past week's revelations. Federal agents had executed search warrants at their home, seizing decades of hidden documents related to my illegal adoption. They'd hired their own attorneys, separate from Madison's, suggesting fractures in their united front. Sarah rose to present our opening statement, her voice carrying the authority of absolute conviction. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate through irrefutable evidence that Madison Walker orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy to frame her adopted sister for drug trafficking. This conspiracy involves cyber attacks, identity theft, corporate espionage, and ultimately planting cocaine in Ms. Bria Walker's childhood belongings." Madison's lead attorney, Richard Stone, countered with his own narrative. "The defense will show that Bria Walker, consumed by jealousy over her sister's pregnancy and favored position in the family, has manufactured evidence to deflect from her own criminal activities. These accusations against Madison Walker are the desperate attempts of a guilty person to avoid responsibility." The first witness called was David Park, our tech specialist. He walked the court through the digital evidence with meticulous precision, displaying Madison's messages on the courtroom screens. Each revelation built upon the last: the encrypted communications with Kevin Chen, the detailed planning documents, the financial transfers from the broker. Objection Stone called repeatedly, challenging the authentication of digital evidence. These messages could have been fabricated by anyone with technical knowledge. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, known for her no-nonsense approach, overruled most objections. "Mr. Park has provided detailed authentication protocols. The evidence stands. Continue." David's testimony lasted 2 hours, systematically destroying any claim that I had the technical capability or connections to frame myself. He showed how the cyber attacks originated from IP addresses linked to Kevin Chen's apartment, how the malware contained code signatures matching his previous crimes, and how the timeline made it impossible for me to have orchestrated events while being victimized by them. The turning point came when Harrison Webb took the stand as a federal prosecutor. His testimony shifted the entire narrative from family drama to federal investigation. "The FBI has been investigating a corporate espionage ring operating out of Chicago for 2 years, he stated. 6 weeks ago, we identified Madison Walker as a key player, selling stolen architectural designs through an intermediary known as the broker. The drugs planted in Bria Walker's possession matched those seized in arrests connected to this ring." "Can you elaborate on Madison Walker's involvement?" Sarah prompted. Madison Walker accessed her sister's work computer through planted malware, stealing proprietary designs worth millions. She sold this information for $50,000 in cryptocurrency. When she learned we were closing in, she attempted to frame her sister to deflect suspicion. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Madison's carefully crafted image of innocent victim crumbled as federal crimes were laid bare. Her attorneys huddled in frantic conference while she sat frozen, the reality of her situation finally penetrating her delusions. But the most dramatic moment was yet to come. Sarah called Jake Summers to testify, Madison's ex-boyfriend who'd become our star witness. He took the stand nervously, clearly uncomfortable, being in the same room as Madison. Mr. Summers. Sarah began gently, "Can you describe your relationship with Madison Walker?" "We dated for 8 months. I broke it off when I discovered she'd been stealing from me and lying about being pregnant." Madison's mask slipped, shooting Jake a venomous look before remembering the judge was watching. Her hand moved to her stomach in a practiced gesture, still maintaining the pregnancy fiction despite medical records. Sarah was prepared to introduce. "Did Madison ever discuss her sister Bria with you?" "Constantly. She was obsessed, blamed Bria for everything wrong in her life. She said Bria stole their parents' love by being adopted, stole success that should have been Madison's, even stole the ability to have children just by existing." "That's a lie," Madison burst out, earning a sharp rebuke from Judge Hawthorne. Jake continued, his voice growing stronger. "She showed me the adoption papers she found, said they gave her power over her parents. She bragged about making them do whatever she wanted by threatening exposure. The night she claimed to be pregnant, she told me she'd make sure Bria never made it to her wedding." Sarah introduced the video recordings next. Madison's drunken rants filled the courtroom, her own voice condemning her more thoroughly than any prosecutor could. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as Madison detailed her plans, celebrated her victories, and revealed the depth of her malice. When Sarah finally called me to testify, I was ready. I recounted years of favoritism, escalating sabotage, and finally the frame-up that brought us to court. But I focused on facts rather than emotion, letting evidence speak louder than accusations. The most painful testimony came from an unexpected source. My adoptive mother, Carol Walker, was called as a hostile witness. Under questioning from both Sarah and the federal prosecutor, she crumbled completely. Madison found the adoption papers 6 months ago. Carol admitted, tears streaming. She threatened to expose everything if we didn't help her. The adoption wasn't legal. We paid $40,000 to a doctor who said he could get us a baby. We've lived in fear for 28 years. And you participated in framing Bria to protect that secret, Sarah pressed. Carol's yes was barely audible. She went on to describe watching Madison plant the drugs, being told to act as witnesses, choosing their biological daughter over the one they'd illegally adopted. Her testimony destroyed any remaining defense Madison might have mounted. The final witness was Eleanor Matthews herself. She took the stand with quiet dignity, every inch the federal judge, despite being here as a victim and mother. Her testimony about the illegal adoption, the decades of searching and finding her daughter, just as Madison tried to destroy her, moved even hardened court reporters to tears. "For 28 years, I believe my daughter died at birth." Eleanor said, her voice steady despite visible emotion. "I discovered she'd been sold to people who would later help frame her for crimes she didn't commit. The cruelty is almost unbearable, but the truth must be told." As witness after witness testified, Madison's facade cracked completely. By the time both sides rested, her attorneys looked defeated. The evidence was overwhelming: digital trails, financial records, witness testimony, and Madison's own recorded confessions painted an undeniable picture of conspiracy and malice. Judge Hawthorne called a recess before ruling. In the hallway, Madison was arrested by federal agents on charges of corporate espionage, conspiracy, and fraud. Her scream of rage echoed through the courthouse as reality finally penetrated her delusions. She turned on our parents, shrieking about their betrayal, their secrets, their crimes. "You said you'd protect me. You promised I'm your real daughter. She's just something you bought." The words hung in the air as officers led her away. My parents stood abandoned, their biological daughter in custody, and their adopted one free but forever lost to them. They'd gambled on Madison and lost everything. When court reconvened, Judge Hawthorne's ruling was swift and decisive. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, all charges against Bria Walker are dismissed with prejudice. The court finds clear evidence of conspiracy to frame an innocent person. I'm referring all evidence to the appropriate authorities for prosecution of those responsible." The gavel fell with finality. I was free cleared of all charges, my record expunged. But more than legal vindication, the hearing had exposed every secret, every lie, every crime that had shaped my life. The truth was public, now impossible to deny or minimize. Eleanor embraced me as we left the courtroom, her judicial reserve finally breaking. "Welcome back to the world, my daughter. Now we can start building the life you should have had." Marcus waited outside, his relief palpable as he pulled me close. Reporters shouted questions about the illegal adoption, the corporate espionage, the family betrayal. Sarah fielded them with practiced ease while we escaped to a waiting car. The preliminary hearing that was supposed to formalize charges against me had instead become Madison's downfall. Her own words, recorded in arrogance and alcohol, had sealed her fate. The parents who'd enabled her for years would face their own trials. And somewhere in sealed records, information about a twin sister waited to be discovered. Justice had prevailed, but the victory felt hollow. My family was destroyed, though I was beginning to understand they'd never truly been mine. The life I'd known was over, but Eleanor was right. Now I could build something real with people who'd proven their loyalty through action rather than empty words. Madison would spend years in federal prison, her dreams of easy money and consequence-free life shattered by her own cruelty. She'd wanted to destroy me, but had instead destroyed herself, taking our parents down with her. The frame-up meant to be my ending had become hers poetic justice for a crime born of jealousy and executed with malice. As we drove away from the courthouse, I thought about the journey from that jail cell to freedom. Madison's planted drugs had triggered an avalanche of truth that exposed decades of lies. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the keys to liberation we didn't know we needed. My sister's final gift, wrapped in cruelty, was the truth that set me free. Eleanor Matthews lived in a townhouse in Lincoln Park that spoke of understated elegance and professional success. As Marcus and I approached her door the day after the hearing, I noticed the small details, a mezuzah on the doorframe security cameras that were discreet but comprehensive, and window boxes filled with herbs that suggested someone who cooked rather than just heated takeout. She answered the door herself, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater that made her look more like a professor than a federal judge. The formal distance she'd maintained during legal proceedings vanished as she welcomed us into her home. "I've imagined this moment 10,000 times," she said, leading us to a living room filled with books and comfortable furniture. "Having you here in my home, safe and free, I never dared hope it would actually happen." The space felt lived-in, warm in ways my adoptive parents' house never had, despite its larger size. Family photos covered one wall showing Eleanor at various ages with people who must be my biological relatives. My absence from those photos was a visible wound in the timeline of her life. We settled onto a soft leather couch while Eleanor poured tea from a ceramic pot that looked handmade. Her hands trembled slightly, the only sign of nerves from a woman who commanded federal courtrooms. "I need you to understand something." She began setting down her cup with deliberate care. "I was 17 when I got pregnant. My parents were state senators with presidential ambitions. A teenage pregnancy would have destroyed their careers, so they sent me away." She retrieved a box from a nearby shelf worn at the corners from decades of handling. Inside were documents, photos, and mementos from a time when she'd been younger than Madison, facing an impossible situation. This was the Serenity Home for Troubled Girls. The photo showed an imposing Victorian mansion that looked more like a prison than a refuge. They called it a boarding school to anyone who asked. I spent 7 months there, hidden away like a shameful secret. The pictures progressed through her pregnancy, a young woman growing rounder while her smile grew sadder. In the last photo before delivery, she stood beside a window hand on her belly, looking directly at the camera with defiance that reminded me of my own stubborn streak. I went into labor on January 15th. They sedated me heavily, said it was for my own good. When I woke up, Dr. Brennan told me both babies had died. twins who couldn't survive birth. I begged to see them, to hold them, to say goodbye. He said it would only make things harder. Both babies. The confirmation of a twin sent fresh chills through me. Eleanor pulled out medical records pointing to discrepancies she'd spent years analyzing. Look at the times. Baby A born at 11:47 p.m., baby B at 11:53 p.m., both listed as deceased at 11:55 p.m. How do two babies die simultaneously, 2 minutes after the second birth? How were there no attempts at resuscitation documented? I knew something was wrong immediately, but I was 17, traumatized and powerless. Her parents had collected her the next day, expecting her to resume life as if nothing had happened. But Eleanor couldn't forget the babies she'd never seen the daughters declared dead without explanation. The doubt became an obsession that shaped her entire future. I chose law school to understand the system that had failed us. Every class, every case, every step up the judicial ladder was about gaining power to find the truth. I hired my first investigator 20 years ago with my first big legal settlement. James Morrison is the 7th but the first to succeed. She showed us investigation files spanning decades each one, ending in dead ends until recently. The breakthrough had come from Dr. Brennan himself, dying of cancer and seeking to clear his conscience by confessing to authorities. His testimony had been sealed, but Eleanor's position finally gave her access. He sold over 200 babies between 1985 and 1998. The man built a fortune on stolen children and broken mothers. Your adoptive parents were just one couple among many desperate enough to pay and ask no questions. He kept records of every transaction, hidden but detailed. That's how we found you. But the twin, I asked, voicing the question that haunted us both. Madison, she said simply. The name hit like a physical blow. Marcus gripped my hand as the impossible truth sank in. My tormentor, the sister who'd tried to destroy me, was actually my biological twin. The cosmic cruelty of it stole breath from my lungs. Eleanor produced DNA test results, irrefutable proof of what seemed impossible. Madison was your twin sister. The Walkers couldn't have children naturally. When Dr. Brennan offered them 2 babies from the same birth mother, they took both. They raised you together, never telling either of you the truth. The revelations recontextualized everything. Our different treatments suddenly made horrible sense. They'd favored Madison not because she was biological and I was adopted, but because she reminded them less of their crime. I looked like Eleanor, a daily reminder of the federal judge whose children they'd stolen. Madison's features favored her biological father, letting them pretend she was naturally theirs. They knew I said anger building as pieces clicked together. They knew we were twins, knew we were both stolen, and they let Madison torment me while keeping this secret. Based on the evidence, they planned to tell neither of you. But Madison found the partial truth, not realizing it applied to her, too. She discovered your adoption papers, but not her own. The irony is staggering. She destroyed her own biological sister out of jealousy, never knowing you shared the same wound. Eleanor pulled out more documents, these showing her search for Madison, too. I've been looking for both of you, but Madison Walker didn't appear in any of my searches because I was looking for adopted children who knew they were adopted. She's lived her entire life believing she was their biological child. The room spun as I processed this information. Every cruel word, every act of sabotage, every moment of hatred between us took on new meaning. We were twins, separated by secrets raised in the same house, but different worlds, poisoned against each other by parents who'd stolen us both. She needs to know, I heard myself say. Madison needs to know the truth. Eleanor nodded slowly. I've struggled with that decision. She tried to destroy you, would have sent you to prison for life. But she's also my daughter, another victim of crimes that started before either of you could defend yourselves. Marcus voiced the pragmatic concern. She's facing federal charges. This information could complicate her case, maybe even help her defense claim mental distress or manipulation. Sarah and I have discussed it extensively. The truth will come out during the adoption fraud trials anyway. Better she hears it from us than from prosecutors using it against our parents. But Bria, the decision is yours. She's wronged you in ways that can't be undone. I thought about Madison in federal custody, still maintaining her delusions of superiority. She'd built her entire identity on being the real daughter, the chosen one, the biological child who belonged. Learning she was also adopted, also stolen, also living a lie would shatter whatever remained of her psyche. But beneath my anger lay something more complicated. We were twins who'd shared a womb, been sold together, raised in the same house. The connection I'd always felt and she'd always rejected was real, biological, undeniable. We were sisters in every possible way, bound by blood and betrayal alike. Set up a meeting, I decided. She should hear it from us, from her biological mother and sister. Whatever she does with the truth is her choice, but she deserves to have it. Eleanor's relief was palpable. She'd gained one daughter only to see the other imprisoned, a bittersweet reunion that would never match her dreams. But she was still a mother to us both, still searching for ways to heal wounds that started with our stolen birth. The rest of the afternoon passed in sharing. Eleanor told us about her life after losing us law school, driven by grief, a brief marriage that couldn't survive her obsession with finding her daughter's professional success that felt hollow without family to share it. She'd built an impressive life while carrying an invisible wound that shaped every choice. I found myself studying her features, finding echoes of my own. The way she tilted her head while thinking, how her hands moved when she spoke passionately, the stubborn set of her jaw when discussing injustice. These were my gestures, too, inherited despite our separation, proof that biology carried more than just physical appearance. "Would you like to meet the rest of the family?" Eleanor asked carefully. "My siblings, your aunts and uncles, have waited 28 years to meet you. They supported my search even when it seemed hopeless." The prospect of extended family felt overwhelming after a lifetime of feeling alone. But Marcus squeezed my hand encouragingly, reminding me that building new connections didn't betray old ones, even when those old ones had betrayed me. I'd like that, I agreed. Maybe after we talked to Madison, one revelation at a time. As we prepared to leave, Eleanor handed me a thick envelope. "These are letters I wrote you both over the years. On birthdays, holidays, random Tuesdays when missing, you felt unbearable. I never thought I'd get to deliver them, but now, when you're ready, they're yours." The weight of 28 years of love sat heavy in my hands. This woman had mourned us, searched for us, built her entire life around the possibility of finding us. The parents who'd raised me had participated in framing me rather than face the truth of their crimes. The contrast was stark, painful, and oddly liberating. We drove home in contemplative silence, processing revelations that rewrote our entire understanding of my history. Madison wasn't my adoptive sister who'd tormented me out of biological superiority. She was my twin, stolen alongside me, raised in ignorance that twisted into cruelty. We were both victims who'd become weapons against each other in our parents' desperate game of deception. Tomorrow we would visit her in federal detention. Tomorrow she would learn that everything she'd believed about herself was a lie. Tomorrow, two twins separated by secrets would finally face the truth of their connection. But tonight I held letters from a mother who'd never stopped loving daughters she'd never met. Tonight I had proof that blood could mean something beyond betrayal, that family could be found in unexpected places, that love could survive decades of separation and searching. Madison had tried to destroy me, never knowing she was attacking her own twin. Now she would learn we were bound by more than adoption, more than rivalry, more than the crimes of parents who'd stolen us both. We were sisters in every sense, biological mirrors raised to be enemies, twins, who'd found each other only through mutual destruction. The irony was cosmic in its cruelty and perfect in its justice. Madison's campaign against me had exposed the very truth she'd never wanted to face. We were the same. Both adopted, both stolen, both living lies, crafted by parents too selfish to tell the truth. Her superiority had been delusion, her biological claim a fiction, her entire identity built on foundations as false as mine. Soon she would know what I knew. Soon she would face what I'd faced. Whether that knowledge would bring understanding or deeper hatred remained to be seen. But Eleanor was right about one thing. The truth, however painful, was better than the lies that had poisoned us both from birth. The federal detention center felt like a fortress of concrete and razor wire designed to contain dangerous criminals and crush hope. As Eleanor, Sarah Chen, and I passed through security checkpoints, I wondered if Madison understood yet that her designer clothes and manipulative tears wouldn't help her here. Sarah had arranged for a private conference room typically reserved for attorney-client meetings. The guards knew Judge Matthews by reputation and treated us with careful respect, though their expressions suggested curiosity about why a federal judge was visiting an inmate charged with corporate espionage and conspiracy. Madison entered in orange jail clothing that stripped away her carefully cultivated image. No makeup could hide the dark circles under her eyes or the reality of her situation. She stopped short, seeing Eleanor confusion flickering across her face before her usual mask of disdain settled into place. "Come to gloat?" she asked, directing the question at me while ignoring the others. "Perfect Bria wins again while I rot in here. How satisfying this must be for you." "Sit down, Madison," Sarah said firmly. "We have information you need to hear, information that changes everything you think you know about yourself and your life." Madison slouched into a chair, arms crossed defensively. Her eyes kept darting to Eleanor, trying to place why a federal judge would be present. The resemblance between Eleanor and me was obvious, but Madison hadn't made the connection yet. Eleanor placed a folder on the table, her judicial composure barely containing maternal emotion. "My name is Eleanor Matthews. 28 years ago, I gave birth to twin daughters at the Serenity Home for Troubled Girls. I was told both babies died during delivery." So Madison's voice carried false bravado, but her hands had started trembling. "What does some sob story have to do with me?" "I am your biological mother," Eleanor continued steadily. "You and Bria are twins. You were both stolen at birth by Dr. Harold Brennan and sold to Robert and Carol Walker for $40,000 each. Neither of you were legally adopted. You were both trafficked infants." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's face cycled through emotions, disbelief, anger, confusion, and finally something that looked like terror. She shook her head repeatedly, a child denying unwanted reality. No, that's impossible. I'm their real daughter. Bria's the adopted one. I found the papers. I saw them." Sarah slid documents across the table. "These are your adoption papers, Madison. Identical to Bria's except for the name. Same doctor, same date, same illegal transaction. The only difference is that your parents hid yours better." Madison's hands shook as she examined the evidence. Birth certificates, medical records, DNA test results confirming what seemed impossible. Her entire worldview crumbled with each page, the identity she'd wielded as a weapon revealed as another lie. They knew, she whispered, realization dawning with horrible clarity. They knew we were both adopted, and they never told me. They let me torture Bria over being adopted when I was exactly the same. "Worse than that," I said, speaking for the first time. "They favored you because I looked like Eleanor. Every time they saw me, they remembered their crime. You were easier to love because you let them pretend the lie was real." Madison looked between Eleanor and me, finally seeing the obvious resemblance. Her face crumpled as 25 years of delusion shattered. Everything she'd believed about herself, every cruel word she'd thrown at me, every moment of superiority, had been based on fiction. "I'm adopted," she said, testing the words like foreign language. "I'm adopted, and I tried to destroy my own twin sister for being adopted. Oh God, what have I done?" The breakdown was complete, authentic in ways her manipulative tears never were. She sobbed with the abandon of someone whose entire identity had evaporated, leaving nothing but horrible truth and consequences she couldn't escape. Eleanor reached across the table, mother's instinct overcoming judicial reserve. Madison, you're still my daughter. Both of you are. What was done to us was criminal, but we can build something new from the truth." Madison recoiled from the touch. Don't understand what I've done. I destroyed her life because I thought I was better, thought I was real. I planted drugs, committed federal crimes, turned our parents into accomplices. And for what? Because I was jealous of my own twin." The guards watched nervously as Madison's distress escalated. But this wasn't manipulation or performance. This was genuine anguish from someone facing the worst possible truth. Everything she'd believed was a lie, and she'd destroyed her only biological family because of it. Our parents, she spat the words like poison. They watched me plan everything. They knew why I hated Bria, and they let me because they hated her too. Hated her for looking like you, for being evidence of what they'd done. Sarah documented every word building the case against Robert and Carol Walker. Their psychological abuse of both daughters, allowing one to torment the other while knowing they were twins, added another layer to their crimes. The illegal adoption was just the beginning of how they'd failed us. Madison turned to me, mascara streaming down her face in black rivers. "I can't undo it. I can't take back what I've done. You're my twin sister, and I tried to send you to prison for life. How do you not hate me?" The question I'd been asking myself since learning the truth. Looking at Madison, now seeing my own features reflected in her devastated face, feeling the connection that had always existed but been poisoned by lies, I found an unexpected answer. "I do hate what you did. I hate the pain you caused, the life you tried to steal, the cruelty you showed. But I also understand you were a victim too. We were both stolen. Both lied to both, shaped by parents who committed crimes to have us. You just found out today what I learned weeks ago. We're the same Madison. Both adopted, both betrayed, both used." She laughed bitterly. "The same you became successful despite their favoritism. I became a criminal because of it. You rose above while I sank below. We're nothing alike." Eleanor intervened gently. "You're twins who were raised in a toxic environment that pitted you against each other. They made you enemies when you should have been allies. The crimes you committed were your choice, Madison, but the foundation was laid by adults who failed you both from birth." "What happens now?" Madison asked, exhaustion replacing hysteria. "I'm facing federal charges. You're free and reunited with our biological mother. How does knowing we're twins change any of that?" "It doesn't change the legal consequences," Sarah said honestly, "but it provides context for sentencing. A good attorney can argue manipulation, psychological abuse, identity crisis. You might face 5 years instead of 20. 5 years. Madison absorbed the number like a physical blow. 5 years to think about how I destroyed my twin sister out of jealousy for a lie. "You'll have something else to think about," Eleanor said. "I'll visit you. Both of us will if Bria agrees. You're my daughter, Madison. Both of you are. I've waited 28 years to find you. I won't abandon you now, even in prison." The offer hung between us, an olive branch extended across decades of deception and recent destruction. Madison looked at me, searching for something she had no right to expect. Forgiveness, understanding hope for a future that included family. "I'll need time," I said honestly. "Too much has happened to pretend sisterhood comes easily, but I'm willing to try eventually. We're twins, Madison. That means something, even if we don't know what yet." Madison nodded, tears still falling, but calmer now. The shock was settling into acceptance, denial, giving way to horrible clarity. She'd have years in prison to process what she'd learned, to understand how thoroughly she'd been shaped by lies to maybe become someone different than the person who'd tried to destroy me. The meeting ended with Madison being led back to her cell, shoulders slumped with the weight of revelation. She paused at the door, looking back at Eleanor and me, standing together, biological family she'd never known existed. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for everything. It doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." Then she was gone, leaving us to process our own emotions. Eleanor wept quietly for both daughters, one free but wounded the other, imprisoned by her own actions. I felt hollowed out, emptied of the anger that had sustained me through the trial, left with complicated grief for the sister relationship we'd never had. Sarah drove us back to the city, respecting our need for silence. The truth had been revealed in all its ugly completeness. Madison knew she was adopted, knew we were twins, knew her entire identity had been built on lies. The superiority she'd wielded like a weapon had evaporated, leaving her with nothing but regret and federal charges. At Eleanor's townhouse, we sat with tea. Neither of us drank, processing the aftermath. My biological mother looked older, worn by meeting both daughters under such circumstances. Her dream of reunion hadn't included prison walls and federal charges. "She'll survive this," Eleanor said finally. "Madison is stronger than she knows. Prison might actually help her, force her to build an identity based on truth instead of lies. When she gets out, maybe we can have the relationship you deserved from birth." Maybe I agreed, though the word carried more hope than certainty. 28 years of poison couldn't be undone by one revelation, no matter how profound. But we were twins, connected by more than either of us had understood, and that connection had survived even mutual destruction. The parents who'd raised us would face their own reckoning soon. Federal charges for illegal adoption, state charges for conspiracy to frame me. Financial crimes Madison had exposed in her rage. They'd lose everything they'd spent decades protecting, brought down by the very daughters they'd pitted against each other. But sitting with Eleanor, planning tentative family dinners with aunts and uncles I'd never met, I found unexpected peace. The family I'd tried to earn love from had never been mine. The sister I'd thought my enemy was actually my twin. The mother I'd never known had searched for me every day for 28 years. Madison had given me an unexpected gift through her cruelty. By trying to destroy me, she'd freed me from toxic obligations and revealed truth that connected us more deeply than shared childhood ever could. We were twins, separated by lies, raised as enemies, reunited through mutual destruction. It wasn't the sisterhood either of us had wanted, but it was real in ways our childhood relationship never had been. The truth had unraveled completely, leaving us to weave something new from honest threads. Madison would serve her time knowing she'd attacked her own twin. I would build a life knowing my tormentor was also my victim. Eleanor would love us both, visiting one daughter in prison while helping the other heal from wounds that went deeper than adoption. We were family in the truest sense, complicated, messy, bound by blood and betrayal alike. The perfect family Madison had believed in never existed, but from the ashes of that fiction, something real might grow. Not today, not easily, but eventually. Truth had that power to destroy pretty lies and create difficult possibilities. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago had seen its share of dramatic trials, but the joint proceedings against Robert and Carol Walker drew unprecedented attention. Media outlets nationwide covered the story of parents who'd bought twins, illegally raised them in toxic secrecy, and ultimately conspired to frame one for drug trafficking to protect their crimes. I sat in the gallery between Marcus and Eleanor, watching the people who'd raised me face justice for crimes spanning 28 years. They looked smaller, somehow diminished without their house in Wilmette, and the respectable facade they'd worn like armor. Orange jumpsuits had a way of stripping away pretense. Sarah Chen led our legal team, while federal prosecutors handled the adoption fraud charges. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records of the $40,000 paid per child, forged adoption documents, proof of ongoing contact with Dr. Brennan to ensure their secret stayed buried, and finally their participation in Madison's frame-up. The prosecutor's opening statement painted a damning picture. The defendants didn't just purchase children illegally, they created a toxic environment that pitted twin sisters against each other, allowed one to torment the other while knowing the truth, and ultimately chose to frame their adopted daughter rather than face consequences for their crimes. Robert's attorney tried to argue duress, claiming Madison had blackmailed them with threats of exposure, but the timeline destroyed that defense. They'd favored Madison for 25 years before she discovered any documents. The psychological abuse predated any blackmail, rooted in their guilt and fear every time they looked at me. Carol took the stand first, perhaps hoping her tears might inspire sympathy. Under direct examination, she painted herself as a desperate woman who just wanted children, who made one mistake decades ago and lived in fear ever since. But cross-examination revealed the depth of their deception. Mrs. Walker, the prosecutor, began, "You testified that you treated both daughters equally. Can you explain why Bria was required to pay rent during college while Madison lived expense-free?" Carol fumbled for an answer. Madison was pursuing artistic endeavors. She needed more support. What artistic endeavors? Her 4 dropped college programs, the thousands in credit card debt you covered, or perhaps the $50,000 she stole from her grandmother's education fund that you blamed on Bria. Each question drove home the pattern of favoritism that had nothing to do with Madison's supposed talents and everything to do with biological connection they'd hidden. Carol's mask of maternal suffering cracked, revealing calculation beneath. The most damaging testimony came from their own records, meticulously kept by Robert the accountant. He documented every payment related to the illegal adoption, creating a paper trail that led directly to prison. But hidden among financial crimes were psychological notes that revealed their true feelings. Sarah projected one entry on the courtroom screen dated just after my college graduation. Bria's success continues to exceed expectations, concerned that her prominence might attract biological family attention. Madison remains satisfactory cover for maintaining normal family appearance. I'd been a liability to manage, not a daughter to love. My achievements threatened exposure while Madison's failures kept them safe. They'd encouraged her dependence while resenting my independence, creating the dynamic that would eventually explode into attempted destruction. Robert's testimony was more controlled but equally damning. He admitted to embezzling funds from his company to pay for the adoptions, then spending decades covering those crimes. He acknowledged knowing Madison had planted drugs, but claimed fear of federal prosecution for the adoption fraud outweighed protecting me. "So you chose to sacrifice one daughter to protect yourself?" the prosecutor pressed. Robert's yes echoed through the courtroom. No justification, no emotional plea, just cold acknowledgement that I'd been expendable when their comfort was threatened. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike had watched Madison frame me without intervention. Character witnesses provided context for the family dysfunction. Teachers testified about obvious favoritism at school events. Neighbors recalled Madison's parties and purchases, while I worked multiple jobs. Family friends admitted discomfort with the different treatment, but feeling powerless to intervene. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a psychiatrist specializing in adoption trauma, provided expert testimony that reframed the entire narrative. The defendants created what we call a splitting dynamic, where one child becomes the repository for all negative projections, while the other represents idealized fantasy. In this case, both daughters were adopted, but only one knew it. This asymmetry of information became a weapon. She explained how our parents' guilt manifested in opposite treatments: overindulgence for Madison to assuage guilt about her stolen status, harsh criticism of me as projection of their own criminality. We'd been raised in the same house, but different realities, twins experiencing mirror-image childhoods that bred inevitable conflict. The prosecution then called a surprise witness, Jake Summers, Madison's ex-boyfriend, who'd been granted immunity for his cooperation. His testimony revealed another layer of our parents' complicity in Madison's crimes. "Madison showed me videos on her phone," Jake testified, her parents coaching her on what to tell police, practicing their witness statements about Bria's supposed drug involvement. They weren't reluctant participants. They were rehearsing for their starring roles. The videos were played for the court. Robert and Carol Walker directing Madison like actors preparing for a performance, suggesting details that would make the frame-up more believable. Their claims of being blackmailed into cooperation evaporated as they enthusiastically planned my destruction. Even Madison testified via video link from federal detention, her own trial pending, but her testimony crucial here. She appeared without makeup or pretense, the reality of her situation etched on her face. Her words condemned our parents more thoroughly than any prosecutor could. They knew I was building toward something big against Bria, Madison stated flatly. I showed them the cyber attack evidence, told them about the planted rumors. They didn't stop me. Mom actually suggested targeting Bria's job, saying career destruction would hurt her most. Did they know you were adopted too? Sarah asked. Madison's expression hardened. No. They let me believe I was their biological child while watching me destroy my twin sister for being adopted. That's a special kind of evil, isn't it? Using my ignorance as a weapon against my own blood. Her testimony revealed the full scope of parental manipulation. They'd encouraged her antagonism toward me, funded her lifestyle to maintain dependence, and ultimately participated in framing me rather than risk her discovering she was also adopted. The house of cards had required increasingly terrible actions to maintain. When Eleanor testified, the courtroom fell silent. Her dignity and pain created a gravity that pulled focus to the original crime. She spoke of losing twin daughters, of being told they died, of searching for decades, only to find them raised as enemies by their purchasers. These people stole my children, Eleanor said, her judicial composure cracking. They turned my daughters against each other for their own psychological convenience. When threatened with exposure, they chose to destroy one daughter rather than admit truth to the other. They're not parents. They're criminals who happen to raise children. The defense's closing arguments rang hollow against the mountain of evidence. Attempts to invoke sympathy for desperate childless couples fell flat when contrasted with decades of psychological abuse and ultimate betrayal. They'd had chances to come clean to heal the family with truth, but chose deception until it consumed everything. The prosecutor's closing was surgical in its precision. Robert and Carol Walker committed federal crimes in purchasing infants. They committed state crimes in conspiring to frame their daughter. But their greatest crime was psychological, raising twins in a toxic environment designed to protect their secret at any cost. They chose their comfort over their children's well-being every single day for 28 years. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Federal adoption fraud conspiracy to frame me financial crimes spanning decades. The maximum sentences possible, though even those seemed insufficient for the damage done. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, who'd overseen my preliminary hearing, delivered the sentences with obvious satisfaction. She'd seen the evidence of my innocence early, and now witnessed justice for those who'd orchestrated the frame-up. Robert and Carol Walker, you stand convicted of crimes that shock the conscience. You purchased children like property, raised them in psychological warfare, and ultimately sacrificed one to protect your secrets. I sentence you each to 15 years federal prison for adoption fraud, 10 years for conspiracy sentences to run concurrently. You will serve every day. They were led away in shackles, the respectable suburban couple revealed as criminals who'd built their family on stolen children and sustained it through manipulation. No tears from Carol could undo their choices. No stoic acceptance from Robert could minimize their cruelty. Madison watched her parents' sentencing via video link, her expression unreadable. They'd been her champions, her enablers, her co-conspirators. Now they were fellow inmates, their crimes against both daughters finally exposed and punished. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions while Eleanor and Sarah provided brief statements. Justice had been served, but victory felt hollow. The parents who'd raised me were going to prison, their comfortable life destroyed by crimes they'd committed before I could walk. But as Marcus drove us away from the spectacle, I felt something lifting. The obligation to love people who'd never truly loved me was gone. The confusion about their favoritism was explained. The family I'd tried desperately to belong to had never been legitimate, built on crimes that poisoned every interaction. Eleanor squeezed my hand as we drove toward her townhouse. It's over, Bria. The lies, the secrets, the manipulation, it's all over. Now we can build something real. She was right, but wrong too. The legal proceedings were over, justice served as thoroughly as the system allowed, but the emotional aftermath would take years to process. Madison and I were both orphans now, our adoptive parents in prison, our biological father unknown, our biological mother a stranger. We were still learning to trust. The collapse was complete. The Walker family that had appeared so normal in Wilmette was revealed as a criminal enterprise built on stolen children. The favoritism, manipulation, and ultimate betrayal all stemmed from that original sin. They'd created their own destruction by choosing lies over truth at every opportunity. Madison would serve her time knowing our parents had encouraged her worst impulses. I would build my life knowing they'd participated in trying to destroy it. Eleanor would love us both while mourning the decades stolen by people who'd purchased her daughters like merchandise. The verdicts couldn't undo 28 years of damage, but they provided something essential validation that what happened to us was wrong, that crimes had been committed, that justice eventually prevails even when delayed by decades of deception. As we arrived at Eleanor's home, I thought about the family photos that would never be taken, the normal childhood memories that existed only as poisoned artifacts. But ahead lay possibility, honest relationships, biological family who'd searched for us, and eventually perhaps a sisterhood with Madison built on truth instead of lies. The collapse of the Walker family was complete, but from its rubble, something new might grow. Not today, not easily, but eventually. We were twins who'd found each other through mutual destruction, mothers and daughters reunited through criminal trials, family forged in courtrooms rather than delivery rooms. It wasn't the story anyone would choose, but it was ours, and it was finally completely true. 6 months after the trials that destroyed my adoptive family and revealed my biological one, I stood in my new corner office at Hartfield International overlooking Manhattan's skyline. The position they'd offered and withdrawn had been reinstated with prejudice, complete with a formal apology, signing bonus and compensation for defamation. My story had become their cautionary tale about proper vetting versus anonymous allegations. Marcus had seamlessly transitioned to Mount Sinai Hospital's pediatric unit, where his colleagues knew our story, but treated us with respectful normalcy. We'd found an apartment in the Upper West Side far from Chicago's shadows, but close enough to visit Eleanor monthly. The geographic distance provided emotional space to process trauma while building new life. My team of 40 architects worked on sustainable housing projects across the East Coast. The Greenwood project expanded into a multi-city initiative. The work felt meaningful in ways I hadn't expected, creating homes for families, while processing what family meant after mine imploded so spectacularly. This morning's video call was scheduled with Madison from federal prison, our monthly check-in that had evolved from stilted obligation to something approaching genuine connection. She appeared on screen in standard prison attire, but her face had changed more than clothing. The spite had faded, replaced by something rawer, but more honest. "Hey, twin," she said, a greeting we'd settled on after discarding various attempts at normal sisterhood. "Hey, yourself. How's the therapy going?" She laughed, but it wasn't bitter anymore. "Twice a week with Dr. Kim plus group sessions. Turns out I have a lot to unpack about identity manipulation and narcissistic injury. Who would have thought?" The sarcasm remained, but self-awareness had replaced delusion. Madison's prison sentence had been reduced to 7 years, with good behavior, the judge considering psychological abuse and identity crisis as mitigating factors. She'd spent her 20s behind bars, but she'd emerge with a chance at authentic life. "I got my GED last week," she continued with genuine pride, "starting college courses next month. Business administration, ironically. Figured I should learn legal ways to make money for a change." "That's amazing, Madison, really. Eleanor will be thrilled." Our biological mother visited Madison weekly, building a relationship without the baggage of shared history. Sometimes I envied their fresh start, but mostly I was grateful Madison had someone who saw her as more than her crimes. She asked me to do something. Madison said carefully, "Write a letter to the parole board about our relationship, about forgiveness and moving forward. I told her not to ask you that, it's too much, but she thinks it might help eventually. I'll think about it, I said honestly. We're not there yet, but we're closer than I imagined possible. Madison nodded, understanding the complexity. She'd tried to destroy my life, planted drugs, turned our parents against me. But she'd also been a victim of the same illegal adoption, the same toxic upbringing, the same lies that poisoned everything. Forgiveness came in stages, not grand gestures. Any word from them, she asked, meaning our adoptive parents. Nothing. Eleanor says they're serving time in separate facilities, both filed for divorce. Apparently, they blame each other for everything. Madison's expression darkened. Good. Let them tear each other apart like they did to us. 28 years of lies deserves more than 15 years of consequences. We talked about her prison job in the library, her sessions with the psychiatrist, small steps toward building identity based on truth. She'd started corresponding with other adoptees, understanding her experience within a larger context of family trauma and recovery. After our call, I walked to my window, processing the conversation while watching New York's endless motion. 6 months ago, I'd been in handcuffs, accused of crimes I didn't commit by family who'd raised me. Now I had career success. Chicago tried to steal biological family, still learning to love, and complicated relationship with a twin who'd been my enemy before knowing we shared a womb. Marcus found me there an hour later, arriving early from his shift to take me to lunch. He wrapped his arms around me from behind solid presence that had weathered every storm without wavering. "How was Madison?" he asked, knowing the conversations always left me emotionally drained. "Better. Different." She asked about the parole letter again. Marcus turned me to face him, reading the conflict in my expression. "You don't owe her anything, Bria. What she did was unforgivable, twin or not." "I know. But what our parents did was unforgivable too, and she was as much their victim as I was. Maybe more because she didn't even know she was adopted. At least I understood why they treated me differently." We had this conversation regularly, Marcus protecting, while I processed complicated emotions. He'd seen Madison frame me, watched our parents enable her, held me through the trauma of arrest and trial. His forgiveness came harder than mine, perhaps, because his love ran deeper. Lunch was at our favorite Thai place where the owner knew our order, and the corner booth provided privacy from curious glances. Our story had been national news, the kind of human interest that combined family drama with legal justice. Strangers occasionally recognized us, though. New York's indifference mostly provided anonymity Chicago couldn't. Eleanor called while we waited for Pad Thai, her voice warm across the distance. She'd been promoted to chief judge of her district, her reputation enhanced, rather than damaged by the revelation of her stolen daughters. The legal community had rallied around her, recognizing decades of searching as testament to character. "I'm coming to New York next week for a conference," she said. "I'd love to have dinner with you both, and maybe you could join me for the judicial panel on adoption reform. Your perspective would be invaluable." The invitation honored and terrified me. Speaking publicly about our experience felt like exposure, but also opportunity. Laws needed changing to prevent other Dr. Brennans from stealing babies. Other adoptees deserve protection from the kind of toxic secrecy that had poisoned our family. "I'll think about it," I promised, echoing my response to Madison about the parole letter. "No pressure," Eleanor assured me. "I'm just proud of how you've rebuilt your life, both of you in different ways. Madison's progress in prison shows the same strength you've shown in freedom." After the call, Marcus studied me across our steaming plates. "You're considering both requests, the panel and the letter." "Maybe. Is that crazy? 6 months ago, she tried to send me to prison for life. Now I'm thinking about helping reduce her sentence and speaking alongside our biological mother about adoption reform." Marcus reached for my hand wedding ring, catching afternoon light. We'd married 2 months ago in a small ceremony with his family, and Eleanor, the wedding Madison had sworn would never happen, transformed into a celebration of survival. The people who truly loved me had witnessed vows that meant more for having survived attempted destruction. "It's not crazy," he said finally. "It's brave. You're choosing to build something from the wreckage instead of just walking away. That takes incredible strength." That evening, I sat at my desk drafting two documents. First, a letter to Madison's parole board acknowledging our biological connection, the psychological manipulation we'd both endured, and her genuine progress toward rehabilitation. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition that she deserved a chance to rebuild just as I'd been given. Second, notes for Eleanor's panel on adoption reform. Our story exemplified everything wrong with closed adoptions, financial incentives, and family secrets. If sharing our trauma could prevent other twins from being raised as enemies, other adoptees from living in ignorance, other families from building on criminal foundations, then the exposure was worthwhile. The aftermath of destruction could be more than survival. It could be transformation using hard-won wisdom to prevent others suffering. Madison was learning that in prison through therapy and education. I was learning it in freedom through career success and complicated family bonds. We were twins, separated by secrets, reunited through mutual destruction, slowly building something neither of us had imagined. Honest relationship based on shared biology and parallel trauma, rather than toxic childhood. It wasn't sisterhood as Hallmark cards portrayed it, but it was real in ways our adoptive family never had been. The letters sent, decisions made. I joined Marcus on our balcony to watch sunset paint Manhattan in shades of redemption. Somewhere in federal prison, Madison was probably in her cell, reading law books and writing in the journal her therapist required. Somewhere in Chicago, Eleanor was preparing for her conference, carrying photos of both daughters, despite one being behind bars. We were scattered geographically but connected by truth that had taken 28 years to surface. The aftermath of our family's collapse wasn't just survival or success. It was the slow, difficult work of building authentic relationships from the rubble of elaborate lies. Madison had given me an unexpected gift through her cruelty freedom from toxic obligations, clarity about who deserved loyalty and biological family, who'd searched decades to find me. I could return that gift through supporting her rehabilitation, not because she deserved it, but because we both deserved a chance to be more than our worst moments or our parents' crimes. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more therapy, continued processing of trauma that shaped us. But tonight, I had Marcus beside me, Eleanor, a phone call away, and even Madison making progress toward becoming someone worth knowing. The aftermath wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Not the family any of us had planned, but the one we were choosing to build from truth consequences, and the stubborn hope that twins raised as enemies could become sisters, despite everything designed to prevent it. It would take years, maybe decades, but we had time now. Time our parents had stolen but couldn't keep time to discover who we might have been if raised with love instead of lies. 6 months after my life imploded, I was building something better from the pieces. We all were in our own ways, in our own time. The aftermath of destruction had become the foundation for something real, complicated, difficult, and true. Just like family should be if you're brave enough to build it honestly. The wedding venue overlooked the Hudson River autumn colors, painting the landscape in shades of amber and gold. Marcus and I had chosen to renew our vows on our first anniversary, this time surrounded by the family we'd built from truth, rather than the one destroyed by lies. The small ceremony 2 months after the trial had been about survival and defiance. This was about celebration and new beginnings. Eleanor stood beside me as my chosen mother of the bride, her sage green dress, complementing eyes we shared. My biological aunts and uncles filled the front row family I'd known less than a year, but who'd embraced me completely. Marcus's family occupied the other side, their warmth a constant reminder that healthy families existed despite my complicated history. Madison appeared on the tablet screen propped on an empty chair, video link from federal prison, allowing her to witness what she'd once vowed to prevent. She wore the nicest clothes allowed in minimum security, her face clean of makeup, but clearer than I'd ever seen it. 3 years into her sentence, she looked younger somehow, as if truth had washed away years of bitter pretense. "You look beautiful, Bria," she said through the screen, and I heard only sincerity. The therapy, education, and genuine remorse had transformed my twin from enemy to complicated family. Not close, perhaps never close, but real in ways our childhood relationship never was. The ceremony was simple vows we'd written ourselves, acknowledging the journey from that jail cell to this riverside celebration. Marcus spoke of love tested by fire, of partnership that survived when family betrayed, of building something beautiful from broken pieces. I promised to choose him every day as he'd chosen me when everyone else had turned away. Eleanor performed the ceremony, special dispensation granted for a federal judge to officiate her daughter's wedding. Her voice carried the weight of decades spent searching, of a mother reuniting with stolen children under circumstances no one would choose, but everyone was determined to transform into something meaningful. By the power invested in me by the state of New York, and with joy I never imagined possible, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Properly this time, surrounded by family who choose truth over comfortable lies. The reception was intimate, 40 guests who'd proven themselves through action rather than obligation. My new colleague from Hartfield, Janet Williams, had become a close friend after learning my story and admiring my resilience. Dr. Patricia Kim Madison, psychiatrist, attended as Eleanor's guest, the woman helping my twin rebuild her psyche from foundations up. During toasts, Eleanor spoke of finding me just when I needed her most, of justice delayed but not denied, of building relationships on honesty, even when truth hurt. She acknowledged Madison watching from prison, including both daughters in her vision of family, rebuilt from ashes of the old. Marcus's best man, his brother David, made everyone laugh with stories of Marcus's determination during our crisis. He called local lawyers, hourly researched frame-up cases obsessively, and nearly got arrested himself, demanding to see Bria during processing. That's when I knew my brother had found his person, someone who inspired that kind of fierce protection. The surprise came when Madison was allowed to offer a toast via video. The guards had approved 5 minutes for her to participate, acknowledging her exemplary behavior and the unique circumstances of our separation. I spent 25 years trying to destroy my sister because I thought she was different from me. Madison began, her voice steady, despite visible emotion. Turns out we were exactly the same stolen twins raised on lies. I can't undo the pain I caused, but I can promise to spend every day becoming someone worthy of the second chance I've been given. She raised a cup of prison cafeteria juice in a toast to Bria and Marcus, who deserve every happiness I tried to steal, to Eleanor, who never stopped searching for either of us, to new beginnings built on truth, even when that truth comes through handcuffs and heartbreak. There wasn't a dry eye as we toasted across miles and circumstances, twins, separated by consequences, but connected by biology and growing understanding. The Madison who'd planted drugs to frame me was gone, replaced by someone learning to be human without manipulation or malice. The reception continued with dinner and dancing normalcy that felt extraordinary after everything we'd survived. I danced with Marcus to our song, then with each of my new uncles who'd waited 28 years to meet their missing niece. Eleanor and I shared a mother-daughter dance that should have happened at my first wedding if crime hadn't stolen decades from us. During a quiet moment, I stepped outside to breathe autumn air and process the overwhelming emotions. Janet found me there, holding 2 glasses of champagne and wearing the knowing smile of someone who'd become more than just a colleague. Penny for your thoughts, though I imagine they're worth more given everything. Just thinking about time, I admitted. This time last year, I was preparing to move to New York for the job Madison destroyed. Now I'm here anyway, married to the same man who stood by me working the same job they restored, but everything else has changed completely. Janet nodded thoughtfully. Your story terrifies people because it shows how quickly life can implode, but it also inspires because you rebuilt beautifully. Not the same life, but maybe a better one. More honest. I considered that as guests laughed inside, as autumn leaves danced in the evening breeze, as somewhere my twin studied for college courses that would help her build legitimate success. The life I'd planned was gone, replaced by something harder, but more authentic. Success without family approval, love tested by crisis, sisterhood complicated by attempted destruction, but working toward redemption. Definitely more honest, I agreed. We returned to find Marcus teaching Eleanor's brothers to salsa, his natural warmth breaking through judicial reserve. This was family as it should be chosen through love, maintained through effort, strengthened through trials that would break false bonds, but forge true ones stronger. The evening concluded with a surprise Eleanor had arranged. A video montage of messages from other adoptees who'd found biological families, twins, separated at birth, who'd reunited families rebuilt after decades of separation. Our story had inspired others to search for truth, to demand honesty to build something real from comfortable lies. The final message came from Dr. Patricia Kim, speaking not as Madison's psychiatrist, but as an adoptee herself. Bria and Madison's story shows the devastating impact of family secrets and the healing power of truth. Their journey from mutual destruction to complicated understanding gives hope to everyone struggling with family trauma. Different paths, same destination, authenticity over artifice, honesty over comfort, real connection over false obligation. As guests departed and evening settled into night, Marcus and I walked along the river with Eleanor. The federal judge who'd become my mother carried herself differently outside courtrooms, softer but no less strong. We'd built our relationship through monthly visits, long phone calls, and shared processing of trauma that connected us. "I have something for you both," Eleanor said, pulling out an envelope. "From Madison. She asked me to give it to you today specifically." Inside was a card handmade in prison craft class with surprising skill. The message was pure Madison, direct, honest, attempting connection despite the chasm between us. To my twin on her real wedding day. "I'm glad my vow failed. Watching you marry Marcus with our biological mother officiating, surrounded by family who searched for us, proves some things can't be destroyed no matter how hard we try. I'm still learning who I am without lies, but knowing you're happy helps. Maybe one day we can be sisters who choose each other instead of enemies raised together. Save me some cake, prison food sucks. Madison." I laughed at the last line, pure Madison mixing sentiment with sarcasm. She'd found her voice in prison different from the manipulative sweetness or cruel attacks of our youth. This Madison was raw, real, working towards something neither of us could fully imagine, yet genuine sisterhood built on truth. The evening ended with us returning to the venue to collect gifts and remnants of celebration. Among the presents was a package from my former employer, Preston and Associates. Inside was a crystal award recognizing my contributions to sustainable architecture, the Greenwood Project's success, despite everything, and an open invitation to collaborate on future initiatives. They'd fired me based on anonymous lies, then championed my innocence when truth emerged. The award felt like full-circle redemption, professional success that Madison's schemes had temporarily derailed but couldn't ultimately prevent. As we loaded cars and said final goodbyes, I reflected on the journey from that cold jail cell to this warm celebration. Every loss had led to greater gain, adoptive parents who'd betrayed me, replaced by biological mother who'd searched decades, toxic sisterhood transformed into complicated but honest connection, career temporarily destroyed, then rebuilt stronger. Marcus and I drove home to our Manhattan apartment, wedding gifts piled in the back seat and future spreading before us, bright with possibility. Tomorrow we'd fly to Costa Rica for a honeymoon we'd postponed, but not abandoned. In 2 weeks, I'd speak at Eleanor's judicial conference about adoption reform. In 4 years, Madison would be released to build a life based on truth rather than manipulation. But tonight we were just newlyweds again, choosing each other after tests that would break weaker bonds. The family that had raised me was gone, dissolved by their own crimes and choices. The family I was building included a biological mother, a twin learning redemption chosen relatives who'd waited patiently to love me, and this man who'd never wavered when everything else collapsed. Back in our apartment, I opened my laptop to find a message from the Adoption Reform Foundation Eleanor had helped establish. They wanted to fund a scholarship in our names for adoptees pursuing architecture or law fields where we were building better futures from complicated pasts. The first recipient would be announced next month, Another Life, touched by our story of destruction and rebuilding. As I prepared for bed, Marcus already asleep after the emotional day, I wrote one final letter. This one to my adoptive parents in their separate prisons, not seeking reconciliation, but offering closure. Robert and Carol. I'm writing to tell you I'm okay, more than okay. The life you tried to help Madison destroy has been rebuilt better than before. I have a mother who searched for me, a twin working toward redemption, a husband who defines loyalty, and a career that thrives despite everything. I don't forgive you. Some choices break bonds beyond repair. But I want you to know your crimes didn't destroy me. They freed me from obligation to love people who never truly loved me back. That's its own gift, though not one you intended. I hope prison gives you time to understand the damage secrets cause, though I suspect you'll always blame each other rather than accepting responsibility. Either way, this is goodbye. The daughter you bought illegally has become the woman you couldn't break. Sealing the letter felt like closing a chapter written in pain, but ending in possibility. Tomorrow would begin the next section honeymoon with Marcus building relationships with biological family, supporting Madison's rehabilitation, and using our platform to prevent other families from building on criminal foundations. The new beginning wasn't just about moving forward, but about choosing direction. Every day offered opportunities to be bitter, or better to punish, or progress to remain victims, or become victors over circumstances we didn't choose, but refused to let define us. As I joined Marcus in bed, his arms automatically encircling me, even in sleep, I thought about the twin in prison probably reading before lights out. We were rebuilding ourselves in parallel, her through education and therapy, me through career and relationships. Different paths, same goal, becoming people our parents' lies couldn't create. The autumn moon cast silver light through our windows, illuminating a life rebuilt from rubble, but stronger for having been tested. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and choices, but tonight was for gratitude. For Marcus, who stayed Eleanor, who searched Madison, who was trying, and the truth that set us all free, even when it hurt. The new beginning had already begun. Each day was just another chance to choose honesty over comfort, real connection over false obligation, complicated truth over simple lies. We were twins who'd found each other through destruction, mothers and daughters reunited through justice families, forged in courtrooms but sustained by choice. It wasn't the story anyone would write for themselves, but it was ours. True, complicated, painful, and ultimately beautiful in the way only hard-won victories can be. The wedding that Madison once vowed to prevent had become a celebration of everything her cruelty couldn't destroy: love, hope, and the stubborn human ability to build better lives from broken pieces. What would you do if you discovered your entire family was built on lies? Have you ever had to choose between comfortable deception and difficult truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about families rebuilt from truth, the power of redemption, and the complicated bonds that connect us. Share this with someone who needs to hear that even the deepest betrayals can lead to unexpected beginnings. Thank you for joining Bria's journey from betrayal to triumph. Remember, family isn't just about blood or legal documents, but about who shows up when truth shatters comfortable lies. May you find the courage to build authentic relationships and the wisdom to recognize real love when it appears even in unexpected places.